It's 10:30, therefore, colleagues, shall we commence this meeting, the purpose of which is consideration of the Council's budget and Council tax setting. But before we move on to that business, I wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge a considerable sporting achievement of some of our local ice athletes recently. And if you give me, indulge me, I'll go through those briefly. The Youth Olympic event in Bosnia, Team Gallagher secured gold at the Youth Olympic Festival in Bosnia, skipped by Hamish Gallagher from Sanquhar, and including Robin Munro from Stranraer, and also the local coach, Scott Hamilton. The 2019 Women's Scottish Curling Champions, Sophie Jackson from Dumfries led her team to become Scottish champions, defeating Eve Muirhead's team in the final, and they will go on to represent Scotland at the Women's World Championships in Denmark in March this year. The men's Scottish Curling Champions, Team Mowat, were crowned Scottish champions and now will go on to represent Scotland at the Men's World Champions in Canada in March and April. The team included Hammy McMillan and Bobby Lammy from Stranraer and Grant Hardy from Kirkunion. The 2019 World Wheelchair Curling Champions, congratulations to Hugh Niblo of Stranraer, who earlier this month was named in the Scotland team to compete in the Wheelchair World Championships in Stirling later this year. The 2019 World Junior Curling Championships, congratulations go to Team White, who represented Scotland at the World Junior Championships in Canada and won a bronze medal. The team was skipped by Ross White from Dumfries and includes Ewan Kyle from Stranraer and Ryan McCormick from Lockerbie. The trophy in the Trophy de Cos at the Ice Bowl recently, it's a synchronised skating competition earlier this month, and 4 teams, Solway Stars, Solway Eclipse, Solway Lightning and Solway Comets, all gained Scottish titles. And finally, the 2019 Under-18 World Ice Hockey Championships, which were hosted here in Dumfries. France secured gold, but the GB women, featuring Megan Gurley of Dumfries, emerged with a highly creditable bronze medal. And can I thank particularly Councillor Hislop and Councillor McKee for drawing my attention to this considerable success. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, thank you. Just to add to that, we also have the Scottish Under-14s and Under-17s champions playing out at Dumfries as well. The Under-17s was secured at the weekend and the Under-14s earlier in January.
Well, that's obviously excellent news, and congratulations to all those athletes who fly the flag for the region and have achieved so much success. And I hope they realise how proud everybody in the region is of them. Today, I will spend some time talking about how we will handle the budget process. But before we do that, we will be considering a report from the Section 95 officer, which will provide a further update on a range of matters with regard to the local government finance settlement and our budget. Also on the agenda today is a report on Brexit, which the full Council requested in December, and I'm sure there will be a range of matters debated as we progress with that. Rona, can you give us a Sederunt and any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Leader. We only have apologies from one member, Pauline Drysdale.
Thank you. Do any members have a declaration of interest?
It's not a declaration of interest. In regards to the apology, just to, because item 4, absolutely clear, it's a family funeral. It's undertaken, just so we're clear, for Pauline.
Yes, appreciate it. It's a serious reason for not being present. Any declarations of interest? Gail.
Thank you, Leader. It's just to declare an interest in item 5 due to my role as COSLA Resources spokesperson. Obviously, I've been involved in the national negotiations on the local government settlement, but I intend to stay in for the debate on the basis that today we're discussing our piece of the pie and not the entire pie itself. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay, can we approve the minutes of the... Sorry, apologies. Councillor Brodie.
Declaration of interest on the...
I'm sure you'd be quite happy for you to contribute to the debate with regard to Annan Harbour and any of the other local members who wish to do so. Can we approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of December? Thank you. If we can move on to item 4, It's a legal requirement that a member who is 2 or more months in arrear of council tax does not have voting rights in relation to fixing the council tax and requires to make a declaration to that effect. Does that apply to anybody? No? Okay, so we can move on and note the terms of the report. Happy to do so? Good. Okay, item 5 is a report by the Head of Finance and Procurement. This report provides information to assist members in determining the Council's budget and council tax level for 2019-20 within a 3-year budget plan, covering the period 2019-20 to 2021-22 and the updated 10-year capital investment strategy. The report highlights that in setting the council tax, we are required to do this based on an overall balanced budget for the financial year. We have Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross here to speak to the report and answer any questions. So can I invite any questions from members on the report? Councillor Crothers.
Just a really small one, because we spoke about setting a 3-year budget for long enough. We'd like to do that if we possibly can, I think. It's from the Section 95's officer role within communication between the Council and Scottish Government, so on and so forth. What's the likelihood of that actually happening coming into next year?
Yes, as part of the Stage 1 discussions on the Scottish Budget, there was some additional provisions indicated in terms of future budget setting. One of those was a commitment from the Scottish Government to produce a 3-year funding settlement from next year. So that's something that has been set out, so hoping that that's followed through and that we'll have 3-year figures at this stage next year.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I note that there's still discussions going on with regards to some pay settlements. Can we confidently take a decision today at item 6 if we don't know what we're actually going to be faced with come another maybe 4 or 5 weeks' time?
I think you'll note from the reports from the Finance Officer that we have made provision for the pay settlement being higher than we expect, that we've set aside £1 million in regard of the possibility that we may have a higher pay settlement. Obviously that happened last year with some councils who hadn't set anything aside and actually had difficulty over the pay settlement that went on offer at the end of the year. Do you want to say more of that?
Just as the leader said, in addition to the cost of the current pay offers in the budget model agreed by members, we've also made an additional £1 million provision to hopefully cover the impact of any further increases above the current pay offers.
Any further questions? You're happy to move on? Okay. Sorry, David.
Sorry, is the officer going to make a statement on the report, or are we moving on to the next item?
There's opportunities to for members to ask questions, but if you've got questions on it.
I have a question. Thank you. It was about a year ago, so I asked the same question. It was concerning the impact of possible exit of Scotland from the UK on our finances, given our massive debt situation. As I understand, Scottish Government policy is to thwart Brexit and to expedite this leaving of the UK, and therefore it's not an occasion that may never happen. It's actual policy. So it's a shame we can't look at it. And the situation has changed, though. In the last 12 months, I believe the Scottish Government policy would be to retain the pound. So it's a clearer situation what would happen in the event of Scotland leaving the UK, and that is that the Venezuelan model preferred by Labour is not a possibility. They couldn't run hyperinflation to get the debt down, so effectively we'd be running a hard currency over which we'd have no control. And there are, if it's still too hot a political potato for the officer to comment on, perhaps you could consider other banana skins which we might slip on. For example, Glasgow, I think, has had an incident recently, and they've had to sell off their buildings, or some of their buildings. Now, I'm reflecting back to 2017, where we had a large building and a large question around this large building, and that building, when it was open, was losing several £100,000 a year. We were told that to remove it would cost several £1 million, and yet we had it on our books as a positive value of several £1 million. So I would like to question, what is our asset base that backs our debt fundamentally in hard times? Thank you.
But clearly the Finance Officer can't answer the political points that you made, but maybe you wish to answer the point about the asset base.
Yes, I'll answer the kind of final point out as a specific question in relation to the asset base backing our debt. We provide information on the assets held by the councils based on formal valuation processes which reflect that in our annual accounts. the level of assets currently, the value of the current assets held by the council is significantly in excess of the current level of debt. We also continually review the level of debt we're holding with our external auditors. We report the potential indicators to members as part of the annual Treasury Management Strategy to ensure that level of debt continues to be at a reasonable level. As I've said to members before, our current level of debt in terms of the loan charges that are required to be funded from the council's revenue account is low in comparison to most councils in Scotland.
Any further questions? Okay. Shall we move on to the consideration of the budget itself? And as I said, I will commence by commenting on how I intend to handle this debate. You will recall that in September, October, this council decided, we agreed a timetable by which any competent budgets had to be submitted by a particular date for publication. They had to be with the Section 75 officer by last Friday, and they had to be available for publication on Tuesday. At that point, we had two budgets up for proposal. There was a budget from the administration, and there was a budget proposed by Councillor Scobie. Councillor Scobie has since withdrawn that budget. He did last night propose an alternative budget, which we did consider at the administration group. It's not a budget which we would accept. It is a budget based on previous discussions which had been within the administration group and doesn't actually reflect the budget which we currently are putting forward. But in particular, that's maybe not important, but in particular, there is a line in that budget which refers to HMO and private registered landowners and their registration fees, and indicates that a sum of £30,000 would be available as additional income. That is actually not correct. We did look at that. I did actually have information at one point which suggested that was the case. I was later told by officers that in fact it was not, and that the increase in income from that source would in fact have been something around £4,000 over a 3-year period, because they are registered every 3 years. And therefore, that budget proposal is not actually financially competent. I'd ask Paul if he could confirm that.
Sorry, can I just ask you what particular proposal are you referring to?
To Councillor Scobie's amended proposal.
So not the one that was issued formally through the process?
No, the additional one.
No. In terms of that further proposal, there's a range of savings in there which haven't been backed up by the level of detail in terms of templates. I pointed that out to Councillor Scobie as well. One of those is the particular one on private landlord registration that you've just referred to.
Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, it's just a pity that nobody came forward to actually second my budget proposal on an 18 or 17.8%, which is grossly disappointing, but nevertheless, I did withdraw, and I put forward an amendment to the SNP Labour Administration budget, and I would hope that you would take that amendment today. It is not an alternative budget, it is an amendment to your budget, and with reference to the transformation of property and land development, I'm quite happy on what has been said by the Section 95 officer to take that out and increase my figure of 9% to 9.3%, or rather 9.2, I think it is, to take account of what's being said. So I would hope that you will take the amendment. It is not an alternative budget, but one to amend the current SNP Labour Administration budget.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. I was about to say that it is not my intention to take any amendments to the budget. We agreed as a council of a timetable for budget proposals to come forward. There was ample opportunity for all groups to put one forward if they wished to do so at that time. We also offered to opposition groups the possibility of discussing our budget, and we did have discussions both with Councillor Crothers and Councillor Maitland with regard to anything that they felt could improve our budget, because we might have been prepared to take those on board. I don't believe that any one group of people has a monopoly on good ideas, and therefore if there were ways in which our budget could be improved, we would have been able to amend our own budget, but we have not had any proposals which have persuaded us to amend our own budget. And therefore, the only competent budget which is on the table at the moment is the administration group's budget, and I intend to proceed on that basis, that there is one budget before us. We will debate that budget. I will not restrain any councillor from commenting on why they don't like it. Everybody will have the right to make their point of view, but there is one budget on the table, and that is the budget which we will be discussing today.
Chair, on a point of order, and I did comply with the time for amendments. I put forward an amendment. I'm still waiting to hear if that amendment is being accepted and be discussed this morning.
I advised you last night that the administration group did not accept your amendment.
Chair, I would have thought it was for the council to determine the amendment, not the administration budget. It was an amendment to the administration's budget. Therefore, it is my opinion that should be considered by the full council, not just an administration group somewhere else meeting in smoke-filled rooms. I think it's for this council to be open and transparent and to allow democracy to take its place and come forward and listen to give consideration to the amendment.
Councillor Carruthers?
I think it's interesting to hear what Councillor Scobie is saying, but I think we should proceed and to see what comes from the actual debate. There may be an alternative for Councillor Scobie to agree with or not.
Well, I'm not intending to take amendments from the floor. I think I'm advised it's my prerogative to decide whether I take amendments from the floor, and I'm not going to be taking amendments from the floor today. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Leader. Excuse if I'm kind of choked up with the call. That might please you, so I can't speak as much. But just one of the things, I'm aware of the budget process because I introduced it, actually, and that process means that the full budgets had to be submitted in advance for practical purposes, really, and that's to ensure the templates are checked and that budget is competent. That is not the same as an amendment to the budget. The implications of that kind of ruling and timescales, etc., is onsetting that has major implications for the running of this council. I mean, is there anything then to stop the administration calling for amendments the day before any meeting? So I disagree with your. You have the right as a chair not, to do it. But I mean, you must give proper reasons, and I don't think that's a proper reason. This is not an amendment. It's not an amendment to your budget. It's your budget with an amendment.
Well, it's not actually our budget because there are a number of budget lines which have changed. The Councillor Scobie's budget is based on an earlier version when it was up for discussion, and we were trying to look down the back of the sofa and find out where we could find the savings. It is not actually the administration group's budget, and the administration group has considered it. I don't want to get to the stage where people are jumping up with amendments from the floor. That's not the way to run a budget. Amendments being randomly coming up from the floor, which haven't been checked by the Section 95 office. We've got to have a process, and the council agreed a process at the end of last year, and that process was that budgets would be submitted by a particular time. Councillor Nicholson.
I'm not particularly I'm going to second Councillor Scobie's amendment, but I still think, we've done this in the past, actually. Yes, it's the leader's right to make a ruling, but even in the past, I was a stickler for that process because of the implications of getting a full budget without proper assessment. But we have changed in the past. We have changed slightly by pulling out something or adding in something that had a template or not a template. So it has been done in the past.
No, I'd agree that the process is not ideal. And that's one of the reasons that we had discussions with other opposition groups. I don't think the current process actually enables sufficient input from people who are not part of the administration. And we're quite up for reviewing it to see if it could be improved. But we have a particular procedure available today And it has been my decision that we follow that procedure and that we go forward and debate the budget on that basis. And as I say, I am very happy to take anybody who wants to speak, whether they like the budget or don't like the budget, and to make those points of view. But I'm going to follow procedure. Can we progress to the discussion of the budget itself? Okay. Okay, colleagues. We introduced this budget with mixed feelings. Some proposals in front of you involve efficiencies achieved by improving the way in which our council services are delivered and learning from best practice elsewhere. Some are actions which the council administration do not take willingly, but have been forced to take due to our financial circumstances. Having already had to find cuts and savings of £96 million since 2010, the council is again faced with a substantial funding gap in 2019-20, this time amounting to £16.215 million. With so large a gap to bridge, we considered that we had no option other than to apply the maximum council tax increase permitted by the Scottish Government, that's 4.79%, and to utilise the health and social care funding offset to its maximum of 2.2%. We've released £1.091 million of policy development funding, leaving £10.161 million to be achieved through the proposals contained in our document. Members may have noticed that the layout of the document is different to last year's. This year we have presented the proposals as they align with the themes of the modernisation programme. To sustain focus of our resources on our council plan priorities, transforming our customer experience and improving our digital offer, modernising how we deliver some services to meet our outcomes, maximising the use of fewer assets and working with communities, developing a more skilled workforce, and maximising our income while underpinning fairness through targeted concessions. Last year we presented the budget as it applied to the council's directorates. We consider that this new presentation focuses better on how we intend to achieve the aims of the council plan under these financially constrained circumstances. Our budget was produced bearing in mind the advice offered by the council's finance officers in paragraph 3.8 of the earlier report, that the funding gap in the next 2 financial years is likely to be in the region of £33 million. Things are only going to get worse. So much for austerity being over. The temptation to dip into the council's general fund balances was considerable. A policy of maintaining these at 2%, as recommended by Audit Scotland, was agreed by the council, I believe, back in 2012, sometime before I joined. Part of this reserve covers functions now controlled by the Integrated Joint Board, and that's a provision which I personally question. However, the general fund balances are like a savings account. Once they are spent, they either have to be replaced, and that during a time of increased financial restraint, or they are gone for good. They're used to fund revenue expenditure such as salaries or the running costs of properties or services, would just be putting off the day of reckoning until next year, when they would no longer be available for that purpose and would not be available to apply in a time of emergency. And talking of possible emergencies, we are still unclear what is going to happen with Brexit. We will be discussing this issue later today, but if the worst scenario transpires and the UK leaves the EU on the 29th of March without a deal, there is no doubt whatsoever that there would be a considerable impact on the ferry routes from Cairnryan to Northern Ireland and the export and import of goods and livestock. Both the UK and the Scottish governments have confirmed that they would need to produce amended budgets which could well impact on the funding available to local government. We could be faced with a sort of emergency which requires the application of our reserves. That said, continued application of the Council's policy of retaining 2% in the General Balance Fund is likely to become even more challenging in the years to come. I want to make it absolutely clear, our policy of no compulsory redundancies remains. No employee of this Council, whether support staff, managers, operatives or teachers, will be forced to leave their jobs. For example, the teacher number reductions in secondary schools will, as Template 5.07 advises, be managed by elimination of vacancies and teacher refresh. And despite the reductions, we will still be advertising for 28 full-time equivalent secondary and 22 primary unpromoted teaching posts to start in August. Template 5.05 proposes significant reorganisation of our Council, with a reduction from 4 to 3 of the number of directorates and a reduction in the number of chief officers from 19 to 15. At the time of local government reorganisation in 1995, this Council carried 90 chief officer posts. There can be no doubt that the Council is a pretty lean organisation. If this budget and the exempt paper are agreed, the Chief Executive will bring a paper to our next meeting of full Council for a fuller discussion on the reorganisation. Despite our financial pressures, action to tackle poverty remains a focus of this administration. The cost of the school day, holiday hunger and study support and free sanitary protection are now mainstreamed into the SIPL budget. We will continue to allocate funding to support credit unions, tackle child poverty and provide crisis grants for people in desperate need, often as the result of welfare reforms such as universal credit. £200,000 will be distributed through our area committees to projects which combat the effects of poverty, and a further £200,000 is to be made available to organisations selected by their communities through participatory budgeting. We are very proud of the success of the Year of Young People in 2018 in our region, widely regarded as one of the most successful, probably the most successful, in Scotland. We celebrated the achievements, talents and contributions of our young people, and in turn they and the Youth Services team were nationally recognised, gaining a number of awards. The legacy of YOYP 2018 will be established through the creation of our first ever Youth Council, an annual Youth Awards event, and the securing of Youth Beats as a 2-day music and information event for young people. Funding for Youth Beats transfers from the Nithsdale Area Committee to policy development. However, we hope that in future its budget will be mainstreamed. We accelerated our transformation programme after last year's budget with the establishing of a transformation board with elected member, officer and trade union membership to oversee and receive reports from a number of officer teams focusing on the modernisation programme. Unfortunately, this process did not yield anything like the anticipated level of savings this year. We need to understand why this was the case, and I believe we also need to involve council staff more closely in identifying how services could be delivered more efficiently and more effectively. We will not be able to transform the operation of the council without the support of communities across the region. In some cases, we will be asking members of the community to work with us to deliver functions which used to be delivered by the council alone. A good relationship with local people will be essential, and we will have to work hard to achieve the necessary level of trust, especially against this background of service cuts. It is hard to be optimistic when we are yet again faced with this level of funding cuts. However, this budget is fiscally competent, and we believe it is the least worst option, and I therefore move this budget.
Thank you, Leader. I'm happy to second the administration's budget proposal. In your statement, you outlined very clearly the severity of the challenges which faced us in drawing up the budget proposal this year, and it is entirely unarguable, as you have said, that whatever might have been said elsewhere, to the contrary, austerity is by no means over. And it is that continuing squeeze on the public finances in almost all areas other than the NHS which has brought us to, if memory serves me correctly, the 10th consecutive budget in which this council has had to manage revenue reductions which have been measured in some cases, the teens of millions of recurring and additional savings every year. It is only fair also to say, however, that the scale of the funding gap has been expanded by pressures in terms of increasing demand for many of our services and the need to fund pay awards, which are, we should remember, the first real terms pay increases, should they be agreed, our staff will have received since austerity began. In that context, our budget engagement process was, I think, a success. We attracted almost 8,000 visitors to the Budget Challenge webpage. Almost 1,000 of those completed the Budget Challenge. They made a large number of recommendations, including improving availability of services online, reducing the number of public buildings, making more efficient use of those which remain, improving recycling, generating more income, and reducing management costs. All of those were identified by the public as potential areas for savings, with the exception of recycling, which members will know is subject of a paper to committee later this year. These priorities have been reflected in our budget proposals. But it's also only fair to reflect that since some of those activities have been the subject of savings since 2010, they as such do not necessarily any longer contain the levels of spend that would allow us to balance the budget solely on those measures alone and without taking decisions which do affect services. And as you have said, while we maintain our absolute commitment to the policy of no compulsory redundancies, which I believe is entirely correct and justified, we do include in our budget proposals which will significantly alter a number of services, including countryside and access, and as has been recorded, employability and skills. We said in our budget last year that in 4 years' time, our council will be very different to the way that it is today. It's a direct quote: some things we will be doing less of or will have stopped doing at all, others we will provide differently. I accept that long-serving members in this chamber will have heard that message across the years in various forms said by various people, and perhaps rather too often than for it to be as meaningful now as it should indeed be. We've listened to it after all, and then set budgets in which money was saved, cuts were made, but after which many things carried on more or less as they had before. That is not the case this year, and neither, if things continue as projected, will it be the case next year or the year after. I wouldn't wish to suggest that we are nearing apocalypse. Our budget continues to invest substantial sums in tackling poverty in this region. We've protected the public transport budget for the second year in a row. We're investing additional capital in roads. We're facing up to our legal responsibilities to our gypsy travellers. And we are supporting the Borderlands project to the full, indeed generously. We continue to support youth beats, provide area committee discretionary budgets, and propose a new fund to help community initiatives work up projects which show the potential to deliver socio-economic benefit for their communities. But in recognition of the situation we are in, we have been very cautious in our policy development spending, foregoing more than £1 million in recurring policy development money in order to help fill the savings gap. We've heard it argued just recently that we try to choose community initiatives over teachers. For the sake of accuracy and for the public record, let's be clear that that specific funding is non-recurring one-year money. As you have said, to use it for any recurring purpose, such as salaries, would be deeply irresponsible. We also look ahead to future opportunities, though they do not yet include financial commitments. The opportunities, for example, of the 2020 Year of Coasts and Waters, what those might provide our region in terms of promoting our fantastic natural environment, and also the importance we attach to delivering Stranraer waterfront redevelopment. On that latter point, we wish to accelerate the programme of work already agreed by committee, our aim being to reach a point where we achieve a worked-up project capable of attracting external funding and in which the community can fully engage. In our budget document, we've set out the objectives we'd wish to achieve in this regard, but these will naturally have to be subject to scrutiny and a decision by members at committee. We've set out previously in public statements our position regarding the proposed workplace parking levy and transient visitor tax. You will see in our budget document, we do not consider either of those appropriate for this region. However, we do believe there is potential for other options in discretionary local taxation. One possibility is a levy on derelict land on properties, and we intend to explore that further with COSLA and the Scottish Government in the coming year. We must also, as you have said, in the context of the financial challenges we face, consider a further transformation programme. I believe it made a good start, but it did not ultimately achieve its objectives, at least not all of them. We should learn from what went well with that programme and what did not, and establish a refreshed transformation board for the coming year. Various officers and members have stated that transformation alone cannot fill the funding gaps we face, and that is certainly true. But neither has its potential been fully explored yet, or its benefits both for delivery of services and realising financial savings fully realised. In closing, Leader, I believe you're right, it is a budget for difficult times, but it is the best possible under these circumstances, and I have pleasure in seconding it and commending it to colleagues for their support. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I open Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you, Leader. Before I actually comment on the actual budget itself, can I ask a number of questions just to clarify, for clarity on the templates and that's been here or the lack of it? Now, I don't know whether you want to take them one at a time or maybe a few. It's up to you.
Okay.
I'll start off and then you can see if you want to answer them first, or I'll just go on right through them all.
Okay, well, it depends how many there are. I might not remember them if there's too many of them.
There's a number of them. It's just to for clarity on the actual budget itself that's been proposed by the administration. I'll start off. The budget's got a large number of spending commitments, and that, unlike previous budgets, aren't accompanied by policy development templates, which is quite a significant change from recent years. The Community Initiatives Enabling Fund, could I ask for, therefore, why there is no information in the Community Initiative Enabling Fund? We've been asked to vote for £285,000 of spending on the basis of 3 words in a budget. It's fine to say that we'll get a report at committee, but in the past, when we allocate funding from money set aside for it has always been accompanied by a policy development template. That's one. Yeah, if you like.
The reason there's not a template on that one is that we haven't yet asked for that to be worked up. It's still a fairly loose proposal. We would want members to feed into how that is achieved. Our intention is to engage with members, because it's about all our communities right across the region, enabling our communities to be able to take forward projects. Now, Councillor Wilson advised us of a group in Moffat who want to take forward a project, but they actually aren't able to get the level of advice, for example, at the moment, and that would help. A fund like this would help them actually get across that difficult stage. But the reason why we haven't actually developed it more than a few lines is because we actually do want to engage with everybody across the region as how this could work best, because if this could lever in a lot of other money, if we're actually getting community groups to engage with this could lever money in from a whole load of other sources, and it would be our intention to develop that across the chamber to make that as effective a fund as we possibly can.
Thank you for that explanation. I'll come back to that when I'm actually speaking about the budget and your explanation. But the reality is we're being asked to vote for £285,000 spending and with no information. But on the anti-poverty measures, I also know that there's no templates explaining the spending on a number of anti-poverty measures. Some of them being credit unions, extra funding for taxi car scheme. There's no explanation as to why that additional funding is needed above the existing budget. The participatory budget allocation, funding for crisis grants, and a commitment to spend £100,000 tackling child poverty. But again, no explanation as to what this will be spent on this year. As a person who was a leader who introduced the anti-poverty strategy and anti-poverty fund, I'm sure they're all very worthwhile commitments. But the changes we made to the budget setting process was designed to ensure that before members voted on spending, we had some details of what that spending was actually for. And clearly a decision has been made to exclude that detail in this budget, and I wondered why.
Well, I actually have the information here. I'm not quite sure why it's not within the budget documents, to be honest. But have you got a particular one that you want to ask about, you want more detail on? Is there a particular one you want more detail on?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, is there a particular one? I mean, is there a particular budget line you want me to provide for detail on?
As I said, there's a number of them, a number of lines there on credit unions, extra funding of the taxi car scheme. It's, as I said, participating budget allocation, funding for crisis grants, and commitments to spend £100,000 tackling child poverty. There's no explanation as to what this will be spent on this year. So all them, I would like an explanation on that. But as I said, they're all very worthwhile commitments. But the change we made to the process, and you talked about process in your statement, and how stickler you're sticking to that process, and it doesn't seem to be happening within that. And I may be just picking it up wrong, but I can't see anything. Well, that's it. Would you want to take that one, or do you want to give you another one?
Well, I mean, I can circulate this template if you wish me to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure why it wasn't included in the budget documents, but
no, it's not in the budget documents. It's just that you were saying about the process before, and you made quite a stage of it. But what I'll do is I'll just go through them all, because I see that Mr. Crothers has been, he's getting bored.
It's not bored. I'm interested in what you're saying, Ronnie, but the fact is that normally follow process is a hierarchy, so you go to the group leaders first, let him say, Ronnie is one individual now. I think it's really follow the process that we normally follow.
Well, it's not a process, that's
Yeah, can you raise your other points then, please?
Yes, I'll raise other points. Now, as I said, all these are just for clarity, and you might want to, expand on them or not. On the employability template, could I ask about that? Again, there's no detail, but I'm presuming this is the previous policy development template, less the graduate scheme, which is being scrapped. But the same as template 1.06 states that the Council is scrapping the Employability and Skills Service. At present, the service delivers employability and poverty social inclusion programme funded by a range of sources, including policy development funding. The policy development funding is continuing, but the staff who deliver the service will be removed by December 2019. Could I therefore ask which staff will actually deliver the employability scheme we are spending £394,000 on? According to the policy development template on this, which was in previous budget, that scheme has a number of commitments: a pathway to employment, total access point, young recruits programme, link workers to schools, with staff funded from policy development money to deliver them. Given the proposal to scrap the employability service, are all the staff delivering the programmes I have mentioned being retained, and are all the targets set out in this policy development template in terms of the jobs created are still relevant given the planned scrapping of that service? On the Borderlands template, can you tell me exactly how much each of the other 4 local authorities have so far agreed to commit for the forthcoming financial year, or are proposing to commit? On reserves, the question is, on the issue of the reserves, could you confirm that the current reserves held by the Council is 6.825 million, and this is 2% of the Council spending, including 2% of what we give to the IJB? And could you confirm that although we calculate our reserves by including the funding we give to the IJB itself also holds reserves of nearly 2%, in fact around £6.8 million. That's the questions, but you can either take them all now or...
Yeah, I'll take as much as I can. I'll take them now. On the employability and skills, the saving is actually temporary contracts, which are coming to an end and will not be, they won't be renewed. It's a programme, a European funded programme, which is coming to an end. However, as the template indicates, the Scottish Government and others are actually considering bringing in a new scheme, which is currently being discussed between the Government and COSLA, and therefore there's likely to be a financial commitment required from the Council to implement the new scheme. On Borderlands, other councils are making a contribution. We may not have to use all this money. This is set aside in case to bring us to heads of terms, but it may not be necessary. We don't actually know yet whether we're getting the money, although I think we had slightly more optimistic news this week. But I think maybe the Chief Executive could give us the detail of what other councils are providing for Borderlands.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leader. The councils have matched our contributions to date, and the agreement that the costs will be shared across the 5 councils moving forward, not just the heads of terms. 250,000 should take us to the agreement to the full business case, and also the agreement to the final deal, which will be the end of a 2-year period. Councils are all being asked to match that, but due to the different political structures and decision-making processes, we're reflecting ours in our budget. Others have cabinet structures that don't need to take it back through the full council process. But yes, they'll all look to match our commitment moving forward. If we do get the Borderlands deal, which does look that we might get an announcement in the next couple of weeks about the size of the deal, then there are different mechanisms moving forward when a deal is confirmed as to how this may well then be brought back into the council budget using that money. But you can't do the reversal until the money's there first, and that's what the budget made clear. But to confirm for Councillor Nicholson, the other 4 partners will be asked to deliver equitable amounts comparable to ours.
Yeah, thanks. He didn't actually answer my question. They're proposing to do that. So they haven't actually at the moment, but they are proposing to do that.
Through their different budget processes, obviously, there's different timings, particularly for our English colleagues.
So the money that we are proposing now is in part of the budget, then you're hoping that they will match it.
They are going to match it. They will match it.
Sid proposing to match it.
To reach the heads of terms agreement, which we talked to in the summer, they will have to have matched it to allow both governments to allocate the money in. If they don't match it, then that will be brought back to this council for consideration.
Thanks very much.
I can just find out on the issue of reserves, which is an issue I referred to in my speech, in fact, that we do hold the IJB's reserves for the health and the adult social care services. Now, I wonder why we hold that reserve and why that reserve is not being held by the IJB, particularly as they do have a reserve of very similar magnitude to ourselves. I am told that some of that is unspent money they were given from projects which they haven't yet spent. I do think it is something worth pursuing in future, because I don't think we should be sending the holding reserves twice. So definitely it's something we should take forward. The only thing with even if we are going to dip into that, which we might want to do in future years, if things are even more tough, is that we can only spend it once. It's non-recurrent spending. It would be, once it's gone, it's gone.
Thanks very much, Leader. We've had that discussion before, but that clarifies the position that you see going forward.
Okay, can I call Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Maitland?
Thank you, Leader. I'll stick to standing orders. I thought I'd be as brief as I could with this, in as far as my battery doesn't go flat. I'll stick to my 3 minutes, Leader. So I'll have some words to say in regards to the background, how we got to this stage. Hopefully you'll agree with that, but at least we summary it in regards, we have a particular proposal. So the Conservative group thought long and hard about submitting their own budget, and after much consideration came to the realisation that whatever budget we presented would be voted down because of the political makeup of this council. So we came to that point. The Conservative group met with the administration, as you've already outlined, to discuss a possible way that they could influence the administration budget. We thought there was a chance of creating an environment that allowed a consensus approach rather than the here it is, take it or leave it style we seem to have adopted. You've referred to that as well. It was agreed that amendments could be tabled subject to prior submission and impact testing. We feel that the compressed timetable, as well as the clear differences in political policy around the White Sands and the raising of council tax, stifled any real chance of agreement. The administration budget proposes to cut teacher numbers, reduce the roads budget, build the White Sands flood defence scheme against a large public opinion that objects to it in its current format, raise council tax to the maximum amount permissible without penalty from the Scottish Government, continues to promote policy development schemes that focus on poverty, reduce the Visit Scotland allocation, remove public toilets, and the list goes on. I feel that's a roadmap to failure, Leader. What would the Conservative group do if they were in administration? We have to at least answer that point. That question has to be asked. So what we would do if we're in administration is, first thing we do is stop the construction of the White Sands in its tracks. We'd take £2 million of the money that's been allocated to that and wasted in that scheme. We would invest that in our roads infrastructure, another 350k of that money, what we've spent wasting on the White Sands, we would set aside as a policy development allocation as a starting point in preparation for the Dumfries High School replacement project. We think that is a clear policy direction from us. A strong focus would be to put our partnership organisations to help us deliver 1140 hours early learning and childcare policy, allow the private, voluntary and independent sector to become stronger and more sustainable organisations that can help us achieve our wider policy objectives at best value. We would have a realignment of the poverty budgets to help stimulate jobs and wealth creation, and a strong focus on building the region's economy in an effort to take us away from being one of the lowest wage economies in the country and a place that attracts all walks of life to come to our region to live healthy, prosperous and happy lives. The Conservative group will, when they get into administration, promote a hand-up policy and not the hand-out that seems to be in place. But the question, Leader, the question that has to be asked of the now minority administration that has the council's current leader still got the mandate to lead the council, that has to be asked. It's been asked within our group. The administration consists of 11 SNP party members, 9 Labour Party members and 1 other. Yet we continue to have a minority representative group in charge of the council that isn't what the public in Dumfries and Galloway voted for in May 2007. I'm almost finished. This council's administration should take cognizance of the public vote in May 2007 and stand aside to let the Conservatives lead the way. I'll get to the nub, Leader. So I formally move that I propose that we don't agree to the administration budget and to allow the Conservative group and any other groups or members to bring forward a budget or amendments in a week's time. I formally move that.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. Just on the issue of my leadership of the Council, I was elected leader of the Council by the full Council on the 23rd of May 2017. If the Council wishes to elect somebody else, to be the leader of the council, they have every opportunity to do so. And the other thing I would say is that it's not led by the Labour Party. This is a coalition between two parties. And one of the things that which we have had to wrestle with as two different groups is how we've been able to reconcile our different views. It's not a question of a small group telling another group what to do. This is actually as a coalition which proceeds by negotiation. Now, I realise negotiation is a concept which Conservatives find slightly difficult, as we see with Brexit, but that's how we've been proceeding so far. We've got Councillor Maitland next.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I think probably it all raised a bit of a wry smile, actually, when we had to listen to a previous leader berating a current leader. The previous leader, indeed, who introduced a budget system which those of us on the outside thought was in fact designed to close down debate, interestingly. But the successor apparently is now doing it wrong. And it's even more intriguing that they come from the same group, or at least nominally the same group, I believe. You might think, I think as Councillor Carruthers indicated, he thought he'd strayed into the Labour group room. And we were listening to an internecine debate within that room. It's much more important that we get out here and ask, I think you, Leader, exactly how realistic do you think that this budget is? Because if we look at the line, it's very clear, and I think correctly so, highlighted in your budget, that last year we didn't make £450,000 of the savings which we were supposed to make, which makes, of course, everything more difficult as things roll forward. So, two more questions. I don't think it's completely clear what this will actually mean when it trickles down to real people and real services, because the detail, the devil's in the detail, and the detail's not absolutely here, as I think probably various members realise. I think it's also important for it to be completely spelt out to members exactly what happens. If we agreed this budget today, would all these actions then become operational? Because, for example, we've no idea which roads depot is going to be closing out of the 5 of them. Nobody knows. There are 5 in the template, and 4 are going to go forward. We don't know which it is. I think that's quite important to know. The public, after all, will want to know which lavatories are proposed for closure. If they are indeed, it's not clear. So I think probably what I'd like to know, again, is do all these actions become operational and officer operational actions, or will they be examined by members?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Maitland. On the issue about the £450,000 which has been brought forward, it's not actually from this year. There was an underspend or overspend of £1 million 2 years ago. There was a line in the budget at the time which referred to staff savings, and those staff savings were not met. And we've continued to try and claw that back since then. That's what remains from that to be clawed back. But obviously, in balancing the budget, we have to try and achieve those savings. I understand, I wasn't around at the time, I understand the reason that line was in there was because there was a change in a reduction in the amount that the council was expected to receive, which came in rather late in the day and had to be accounted for in that manner. But as I say, I wasn't around at the time, so I don't have the detail. As far as I'm concerned, yes, we have to trust when we get the templates from senior officers, we have to trust them, we examine them, but we have to trust them that they actually think that those can be achieved. If people are making figures up and giving them to us, then they'll have to be held to account. I hope that is not the case and that people have been honest in bringing forward the savings that can be achieved by these various means. But there will be opportunities for these to be debated at committee. I think it's extremely important, and in fact there are revenue and capital budgets brought to the main committees. That will continue to do so, and I would hope that there would be adequate scrutiny as to how savings are being made. But we do see that, during the course of the year, we do see where there are problems sometimes in savings being made. I certainly don't want to see any coming to committee that say, oh, by the way, we've got an overspend of however many £100,000 because we haven't been able to make this income generation, or we haven't been able to make this saving. I think it's important that these savings are realistic and achievable. In regard of the toilets, the reason on the toilets template there's a fairly low figure for this year is because there will have to be a process. Because if we are going to change the way in which public toilets are provided, it'll be different in different places. Some places there may be council properties which can be made available to the public as our sort of comfort scheme. Some places there may be businesses which are prepared to make their toilets available. In some places there may be communities which are prepared to take them on. So we have deliberately assumed a low saving in this particular year because there will be a long conversation with communities in different parts of the region before we'll be able to implement that. Similarly with the depots, we don't know where people are going to be in. We intend to bring more organisations in to use council buildings so that we know there's a demand out there for other businesses and so on to have properties they can operate from. We might intend to make some of those available, but we don't know yet what people are going to want and where, so we can't be specific that certain depots are going to be transferred to the community any more than any other facility that it actually goes through the CAP process. We need to see what people want, where there is community interest in taking buildings over, or where there is interest in people coming in to operate their businesses from our premises. So, these are, yes, you're right, to a certain extent, these are aspirational, but we hope that we have been given a realistic set of proposals here. Okay, Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Leader. Deputy Leader in his preamble did mention one or two things which I'm going to reflect on. One was the public consultation, which the public, what's it called? The thing to do with the budget on the computer. Whatever it was called. Did that public consultation reflect a cut in road maintenance? 1,000 people took part in that. I would doubt very much if any of them wanted the roads maintenance budget cut. The youth beats, not the most popular thing in Britain. I've always found that negotiation is a two-way process, and this whole budget process, and I think Councillor Nicholson could agree with me here, is verging on dictatorship, and that bothers me greatly. We are a democratic process, or at least I thought when I joined this in 2007 that we were a democratic process, but it's not as democratic as it used to be. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, I would be delighted to second Mr. Councillor Crothers' proposal, which he has put down.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Can I just say on the roads budget, it's not about cutting roads maintenance, it's about changing the structures. It's also about changing the standards. We don't currently operate the national standards. It's about operating to the national standards. So there's a saving, but it's not a saving on the money that's spent on improving the roads. And in fact, we're putting another £500,000 of capital into improving the roads. Councillor James.
Right, thank you very much. I don't like to contradict you, Madam Chair, but you did say something about us being a lean council, and that's not my opinion. I mean, you're lean, but there are 43 of us here, and that's more than there needs to be, and we should start by cutting ourselves before we start cutting people's services. It's probably not a scenario that you're familiar with, but some of your colleagues may have experienced something along these lines. It's the thing that happens is about 11:30 at night at a wedding reception, and some smooth-talking Sassenach is sidling up to your Mary doll, and apparently it's year-round. Sloping off to the bar, trying to avoid eye contact with any other scroungers in the room, and you look down, and the spurn flap is open. And upon further investigation, it's revealed that £50 are missing, leading to £50 pecuniary embarrassment. Now, I had a similar situation open in the council papers this year, and there was £50 million less than there needed to be, and £59 million less than there ought to be in there, and I wanted to know where it had gone. So, upon further investigation, I found out it was not Europhile Phil, and it was not the kind old Mr. Barnett. It was in fact the bandits in Holyrood who continually fuel our massive expenses, madcap schemes and monstrous building and take money from us every year. But I think that was alluded to by the non-aligned amendment or proposed budget that didn't happen. And I'd like to welcome the non-aligned group or groups because they're showing a lot more independence than the independent group until now. And it's probably not time for them to stand up and shout, Brussels no more, Holyrood no more, Tyranny no more, because we have to get our own house in order first today. And this was only half the money that was missing. The other 25 million had gone out the door at the start of the year in terms of in debt repayment. We could have had £25 million more available. And that would mean £10 million perhaps for capital expenditure, £10 million to boost the economy, and £5 million spare for labour lunacy. And that would be a luxury situation which pertained every year if we didn't have enormous debt. So cracking on to the budget now, and I noted with interest we have the Community Initiative Enabling Fund, which I think is potentially a very welcome step. For someone who's toured around lots of communities and given them warning that the council is retrenching, any funds which enable them to think about how they're going to fend for themselves in the future is very welcome. I know there's been representation already from one of the communities I represent, and I hope that will be taken into account when formulating the proposal in more depth. I think it should also be tied in better with community participation, which is not something we talk a lot about, but has got tremendous scope. I mean, I can imagine a better system whereby any community could bid to take over anything it wanted to. Let's say something cost 10,000 for the council. If they could aspire to do it for 5,000, that would be a win-win situation. So perhaps the community initiative, albeit it's very small when you have about 100 communities, it could be a step in that direction. But I couldn't find in the budget the gypsy site at Colleen, so I was very relieved to see that, because that would be a massive commitment which we don't need to make. Unfortunately, I couldn't find reform of the voluntary redundancy scheme, which is de facto a sort of bonus-backed brain drain. I found no reform of compulsory redundancy, and that's a problem because we have to make up jobs, some of which are pretty well paid, for the sake of being a good employer. And we should be a good employer, but not as our first priority, perhaps as our second priority, because serving the public would be our first priority, and we're not best served by the no compulsory redundancy system we have in place. There was no mention here of procurement improvement, and it's procurement where we are extremely weak. There's lots of mention of better adherence to our policy, so I assume that we think our policy is very good, we're just not implementing it very well, but we are poor in that, and it scares me because we can't act until we reform procurement. Reform of enterprise DG, also not in there. That's a big loose cannon that we need to get control of, lots of risk out there. Youth beats continued again and again and again every year. It's great to start things like that, but we should wean them off funding bit by bit, and then start new festivals along the way, and we could roll that out and spread the good. Customer Service Centre being closed or moved in Castledollis, it's not quite sure, could be going into school, lots of safety concerns about that. I could go on and on, but I'm disappointed overall to hear that you've received no help from other sides of the chamber. We have an administration now which is a strange bird. It has an SNP right wing, and an SNP left wing, a Labour left wing, an independent left wing, and two non-aligned legs. So it can neither fly nor walk. It just flaps around in diminishing circles. So if by some means that Ian Carruthers' amendment did not get through, would you, Madam Chair, consider forming a new type of administration? That would be a cabinet, together with the heavyweights around here, like Jane Maitland and our own Supremo, Ian Carruthers.
I got slightly confused on some of that, all the Sassenachs and the flapping spurrings, and you've lost me on a number of those parts. But can I say, on the councillor numbers, and I know that was something that came back from the public, that we had too many councillors. Actually, that is determined by the Boundary Commission. The council doesn't determine how many of us there are. It's the Boundary Commission. It gets reviewed every 10 years, and they come back with proposals. The boundaries and numbers of councillors actually decreased before the last elections when we were elected. 10 years' time, it'll happen again. Actually, I don't know whether local authorities will be here in 10 years' time, because if we go on with the cuts that we've got, I suspect that your local government will be a very different matter. We may cease to exist altogether. Enterprising D&G, you may have noted in the budget document that the Chief Executive is coming forward with proposals to reduce the number of directorates, and therefore there will be significant reorganisation of all directorates, including Enterprising D&G, and we will have an opportunity next month to debate in full the restructuring, but things are not going to be as they are. Some things will change. I can assure you that some things will be changed. I'm not sure what else I can say about I note your views. Well, that's not how our council operates at the moment. At the moment, our council operates on a committee system. Now, you could change to a cabinet system. In Ireland, a number of councils did change to a cabinet system. It was actually, I think, introduced by the Labour Party when the Labour Party was in power at the UK level. But some of those did not, went back the other way and felt that because the feeling was actually that the committee system is more democratic. I mean, a lot of our neighbouring councils have cabinet systems, but the cabinet decides on things, and then the committee, other members, backbench members, don't get much of an input. So it's a debate that can be had, but I don't think it's a matter for my decision. I mean, as I said earlier, I was elected as leader by the council on 23rd of May. If the council has another view that they want somebody else, so they want different administration, they're perfectly capable of coming forward to that. I'm quite interested that I'm being described as a dictator today. I obviously shouldn't have shaved off my little moustache. Councillor Brodie.
Thanks, Leader. No doubt you're all asking the same question you did last year. Where is the Liberal Democrat budget? What feeble excuse is he going to come up with this year? Has a dog ate it? Well, yes, Rory did have a few chews at it, but he found it quite unpalatable and soon returned to his chappie. I blame the wife. Yeah. But don't tell her. I'd excel myself this year and produce not one budget, but two budgets. Handwritten, of course, because I couldn't trust technology again after last year. One was a worst-case scenario, and another one was a transformational one based on my Liberal Democrat 6-point income generation plan, which would protect services, keep council tax at zero rate, and leave a little left over to enhance youth beats, to create middle-class beats, and also to create a geriatric skiffle event which would better reflect the demographic of Dumfries and Galloway. As I said, it's my wife's fault. You may know that Robert Louis Stevenson's wife was reputed to be so upset at reading the first draft of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that she threw the first draft into the fire. Similar. Well, I was driving around English Street a couple of weeks ago. My wife was beside me in the passenger seat. She was reading my budgets, and she was so horrified at what she read, she opened the passenger window and threw both documents out of the window, shouting, "You're going to destroy the whole education system." Obviously, she hadn't read the good budget. Well, I searched high and low for these documents. I thought I would never see them again until I checked my emails on Tuesday and opened the administration budget. And there it was, word for word, line by line, figure by figure, the worst case scenario. Dismantling education, early years, primary school, secondary school, learning support, employability skills. My worst nightmare was staring me in the eyes. But what happened to my beneficial budget? It's my worst case scenario. If a worst case scenario could reach the administration rooms, where would the other budget go? I think my suspicions are Ian Carruthers has got it in his inside pocket, and he's waiting to take over the administration. So, It's been a hard job. You can listen to my 6-point plan if you wish, but maybe I'll just send it. Would you like to hear some of it or not? No. I'll just give you one of the 6-point plans and maybe share the rest with you next year, okay? I think we've all got to think out of the box. We've got to turn threats into opportunities, right? We've got over 400,000 potholes in Dumfries and Galloway. Let's say, well, let's have an adopt a pothole scheme, £10 a pothole. You could also join our platinum scheme. You could get if you paid £50, you could get to name the pothole, and if ever a pothole was going to be filled, you could be invited to the filling ceremony. And how much that would solve half the budget problems in a year. Right, what's another greatest threat? Right, well, obviously it's Jacob Rees-James and his Chancellor in Westminster. A lesser threat, but just as important a one, is Derek Mackay in Holyrood. Right, well, I thought well, SNP could get him down and we could have a sponging event. Let's sponge Derek Mackay, £10 a time, maybe. Then I read his letters that he wrote to Cosla and said, well, halfway through said, well, it should be an egg throwing one because this is a load of rubbish. And then I read the bit that says, this deal is a significant passage which I truly do consider will be the biggest empowerment of local authorities since devolution. So I think it goes beyond the eggs now, and I think we could have maybe stones or nuclear missiles, adopt them. Right, less of the flippancy, right, there's other 6 points plans, but I'll save them for another day. The administration has got a very difficult job. I'd ask them to look again at the education aspect to see if they can mitigate that, because it is going to be, it's going to have dire consequences across the whole of the education system there, and I think we need to look urgently to see how we can obviate these changes. Thank you very much, Leah.
Well, thank you, Councillor Brody. I always look forward to your contribution and you never disappoint. Councillor McGregor.
I'm not entirely sure how to follow the previous two speakers. I think my contribution will probably use far less adjectives than they have. Leader, I had hoped to come here today in some vain hope that I would have been able to support your budget. I think we're in very difficult times. I think we have to appreciate that every member of the administration has not made easy decisions in respect of £16 million worth of cuts, and I think if we were in your shoes, we would be feeling pretty sorry for ourselves right now. However, we know that 60% of the council's budget is either statutory, ring-fenced, or protected. We know, therefore, that 40% is basically what is left for us to take the savings from, and that's where the savings become very, very difficult. As I say, I had hoped to be able to come in and reach some sort of consensus, maybe move an amendment, get a bit of movement, and have a whole council budget moving forward, particularly with Brexit over the horizon. However, along with Councillor Nicholson, I have concerns about reductions in ASN. I have concerns about reductions in teachers, very much so at the moment. We know their workload is very pressured just now, and I think the risk of taking 40 teachers out of the system at this time, when we don't know what the penalty would be from government in respect of teacher numbers, could be a risk. Other members have raised issues of impact of savings across the region, and I wouldn't like to be put into a situation, particularly with toilets, which I think have been specifically mentioned, where in 2 months' time we're having to reverse that decision because we simply don't have the information of the impact. A 4.79% rise in council tax is 3% real terms. I have no specific issue with that because I know that we are the lowest council tax figure on mainland Scotland, and I could probably live with that if we weren't putting additional money into policy development. And I think it's very difficult to argue that our core is being cut and councils have very difficult decisions to make, and that we have reached a cliff edge, and that every other analogy that has been thrown across newspapers in the last 3 months, when we're putting additional funding into things that we don't even know the impact that they're going to have within our communities. And I think the Community Initiative Fund is a prime example of that. I would, I certainly won't plead with you, but I would ask you to reconsider the views of others in the room. I think you're right, we don't have a monopoly on good ideas. I have some good ones, I have some really, really bad ones as well. And I would ask that the Chamber gives us a week where we can work together and perhaps reach a whole council solution. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor McGregor. On the issue of the teachers, I would reiterate that it is vacancy management, it's not getting rid of people. I mean, I know that's but it is vacancy management. On the toilets, again, I'd reiterate that it won't be done in 2 months' time. There's a process to consult with communities and to take stock of what we have that we can offer as an alternative. It's not something that we're going to do straight away. On the policy development money, some of that, excuse me, some of the policy development money is back in the budget again. We did redirect quite a lot of the policy development money. There is still some, but much of that actually is money which is unspent from previous policy development. It's one-off money again. It's not things that we could use to pay salaries or to run services. There are things that we can use to try and make a difference now, and that particularly the Community Enabling Fund is something to try and help our communities to take on some of the responsibilities that they'll be required to take on because we can no longer provide those services. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you actually had recognised me after Councillor Nicholson before you took the ejection from Councillor Carruthers, but obviously not. I think it's disappointing, I've already stated, I think it's disappointing that nobody came forward to second my 17.8% increase, which would have avoided any cuts, unnecessary cuts. And while it may have caused, and indeed would have caused hardship throughout the region, I think this could have been mitigated had the Scottish Government managed the country and introduced more into the corporation tax, which would have meant we would have not been facing what we have, or what we are facing just now. I think we are paying the price of 10 years of council tax freeze by an SNP Scottish Government, and as you said in one of the local papers, vital local services in our region have already been cut to the bone as a result of cuts inflicted by the Scottish Government. I don't think we're just inflicting pain or cutting to the bone. We're cutting off limbs now, so we are. And these are inflicted by an SNP Scottish Government. The settlement has been a bad deal for local government. I think we could all agree, well, at least I hope we could all agree that one. And really, none of these cuts are really palatable. My amendment went some way to protecting teachers' jobs and additional support for learners. And I do believe that the Council could be leaving itself open to legal challenge by not delivering its statutory obligations, particularly to pupils with educational needs. And that's a challenge that may still come forward as we proceed and progress throughout the year. There was reference made to savings that had not been found of 450,000 over the piece. And I do believe that we are setting a budget where I don't think that we were going to be able to deliver and find the savings that indeed is before us today. And again, that could leave the Council open to a legal challenge. I don't think it is a good budget that we're facing. The amendment that I put forward would at least have started to mitigate that. However, unpalatable the cuts were within that. And that would have, as I said, protected teachers' jobs and the additional support for learners. I think if everyone looks at, as we come into any part of the region, it actually says first in Scotland. And I would have hoped, even against some of the previous that were lavishing praise, I would have hoped that they could have come forward and seconded at least the 17.8. But it all says we're the first in Scotland. I would have hoped that we, as an authority, Dumfries and Galloway Council, could have been the first in Scotland to say enough is enough. And I've said this repeatedly in this chamber. These cuts are unpalatable. We should not be making these, and that they're being inflicted, as you rightly said, Chair, in one of your press releases. You seem to change day by day. We should be going to the Scottish Government and saying, enough is enough. We need a proper settlement in local government to deliver the service and the expectations of the people out there. I would still move my amendment of 9%. However, if that, as you seem to be very dictatorial on that point, I did meet the laid down timeline of having it in before 5 o'clock last night as an amendment. That week would give me the chance to work up that budget proposal. So I would still move the amendment that I have provided to every member of this council for their consideration, and I would hope that democracy would prevail and that amendment would be considered today, the 9% increase, with a particular reference to protecting teachers' jobs and those children, those pupils who require additional needs.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. I'm not prepared to take your amendment today. However, you will be aware that the Conservatives have put forward a motion that this is delayed by a week. You would obviously have the option of voting with the Conservatives on that issue. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Leader, and I've got to congratulate you on, you were absolutely correct that other people didn't want to listen to me as well as yourself. Councillor Maitland came in, I was asking questions on clarity of the budget, not speaking about the budget as a whole. I haven't tabled the full budget because there is much within the administration budget I support. I am more than aware that the cause of the cuts the council need to make rests with central government. We have seen a policy of austerity across the UK since 2010, and here in Scotland the SNP government have taken that austerity, quadrupled it for local councils. Between 2013 and 2018, the Scottish Government's own budget fell by 1.3%, but the SNP have cut local council revenue budgets by 7.1%. So we should be honest with the public that this budget means that although council tax will rise, services will still be cut, and hundreds of our loyal, hard-working staff will see their jobs disappear. It's fine for people to dismiss this by saying there will be no compulsory redundancies, but the cuts mean fewer people to deliver services, so fewer services, and it means fewer job opportunities for our young people in the future. There are, however, cuts in staff in this budget which I believe can be avoided if we make different choices, and I would particularly point to the planned cuts in teachers. No one in this room became a councillor so they could vote to cut at least 46 teacher posts from the schools in their communities, and if we can avoid at least some of those cuts, we should. Template 1.7 will mean a cut in 24 teachers by scrapping the common sense policy we have in place for a reason. When a school roll falls below a threshold, that means they'll lose a teacher, but we don't get rid of that teacher immediately, cause minimum disruption. This budget template will mean in future we do get rid of that teaching post immediately, even if we know that a school roll will rise the following term and the post will be reinstated. Template 5.7 proposes a cut of 20 teachers. These are full-time equivalents, by the way, there might be more teachers, and implies that savings can be achieved by having consistent timetables in secondary schools. I would doubt those timetables can or will be in place by June. I know that the term starts in August, but in reality, timetables are put in June. I would doubt that those timetables can or will be in place by then. When schools move into the new term, and even if they do, none of us know what that means in terms of subject choice and classroom contact time, other than it will be less. At the very least, this saving should not come into effect this year until members have properly scrutinised what those new timetables would mean, and more importantly, parents have been properly consulted. I would like to see both these templates removed, but at the very least, templates 5.7. That template is a saving of £561,000 in 1920. Removing this template could be funded by removing the policy development proposal in the Community Initiative Enabling Fund, which is £285,000, and by using a very small amount of reserves, £276,000, which equates to about 0.07% of our budget. We have done this in the past, and it's been in education where we have used reserves and we've put that back in, so it's something we have done before. On the Community Initiative Enabling Fund, I've been involved in budgets for long enough to recognise that the Community Initiative Fund is a last-minute idea, simply to use up a surplus. Otherwise, there would have been a template. The concept is admirable, but bringing in additional spending commitments at a time we are cutting core services is a luxury we can't afford. If there is a need for a fund to such as this, then we should be asking the South of Scotland Economic Partnership to fund it. On reserves, on the issue of using a small amount of reserves on a temporary basis, I've said I don't propose that we change the 2% target for reserves, so that means surpluses will go to reserves until we are at the 2%, which is the current policy. But I would point this out to members. The 2% target we have for reserves is on all revenue spending. This includes the over £68 million we give to the Integrated Joint Board. So we hold nearly £1.4 million of reserves on the basis of spending on the Health and Social Care Partnership. But the partnership itself, been confirmed, it also holds reserves for its spending. In fact, the last account showed, as stated before, they hold over £6.8 million in reserve, and that's been confirmed. That's why I was asking that question. So reserves for our share of the IJB spending are held by both ourselves and by the IJB. Given this, I find it hard to justify saying to the people of Dumfries and Galloway we can't take £276,000 out of our reserves on a temporary basis to stop a cut in teachers. In the budget 2 years ago, again as stated, we used a small amount of reserves for education, and that was returned to the reserves from surpluses a few months later. It would be somewhat hypocritical for members in here who voted for that to now say we should not and cannot do it. Just in conclusion, I am therefore happy to move this as an amendment to the administration budget. It is not a proposed alternative budget with any new templates. Standing orders clearly allow amendments to a motion, and under the current budget process, we have allowed amendments to be considered and voted on previously at this stage. I would also point out that the impact assessment remains the same, because the template I am proposing be removed states in the impact assessment that there is no impact at all. My amendment is the proposed administration budget with the following changes. Remove saving template 5.07, which 100,000. Remove policy development funding regarding the Community Initiative Enabling Fund, £285,000, and use the initial allocation from reserves of £276,000. And I hope I will get a seconder for that.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I think I made it clear that I wasn't going to take amendments. On the 285k, that is non-recurrent funding, that's unspent funding from previous policy development. That and the reserves are not available to pay salaries for more than a year. That's it. If you spend that money, it's gone, money's not available to spend the following year. And it's not a solution, therefore, to the issue around teachers. The teachers would just have to go the following year. But on the issue of also about the economic partnership, at the moment the economic partnership is making available capital funding. There'd be money, it's capital funding that they're making available for projects. Now my hope would be, if the Community Enabling Fund is successful, that will be carried on by the new agency, but the new agency will not be in until 2020. But it'd be the sort of work I would hope that the new agency would actually undertake. But anyway, with regard to your amendment, can I suggest that if you wish to discuss your amendment, that you vote with the Conservatives?
Sorry, I thought I understood budgets probably better than most. If we're not regarding policy development funding as recurring, where exactly does it sit within the entire council's budget? Because I understand that we get a general capital grant from the Scottish Government, it's revenue and it's capital, and we have funding for additionality such as early learning and childcare, which is very much ring-fenced for a specific project. Policy development funding is in the gift of individual political groups to develop. It must sit somewhere within the revenue funding.
Well, it does, yes, it does sit within it now. But no, it's not recurring. That funding is unspent money. That was money that was allocated in previous years. For example, we allocated, I think it was 101.8 million for Wi-Fi in schools. When we actually got the contract, it was about half that. That's a capital fund, so there's some revenue. I'm sorry, that's not a good example, actually. There were a number of projects, and I'm trying to recall what they were, where I think there was a modern apprenticeship scheme. There was, sorry, I can't remember them all just off the top of my head, but there were a number of projects where we had allocated money from policy development in previous years, and that hadn't all been used. And it's that money which can be spent once and then again. And not again. And also the balances, it would take money out of balances. Unless we're going to put that money back in again, that money just depletes the pot.
I haven't mentioned balances, but in respect to the policy development funding, there was a release of circa 1 million this year to assist with the funding gap. However, policy development funding is a creation of this council and a creation of each individual political group. It comes through as the general revenue grant and sits within that. Therefore, it is utterly recurring. It's just in our gift as to how we spend it.
No, but what we haven't spent...
No, there's no buts. I know I'm correct.
No. This money is money that was not spent. It was allocated and not spent. It's something that's sitting in a pot, unspent. It can only be spent once. I go to Chair,
I'd just like to get back and a point you made.
Sorry, you've actually had quite a lot of time today.
It's just about
you have had a lot of time today. Other members...
You're incorrect about your portrayal of my proposal. The proposal was for the funding, and if you had listened to it, which you obviously didn't, at the very least the savings would not come into effect this year, which would make it non-recurrent until members have properly scrutinised what the new timetables would mean, and more importantly, parents had been properly consulted. So it is not a recurring.
Councillor Driver.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'd just like to come back on a couple of points that were made by earlier members in this, and in particular Councillor Brodie, when he talked about thinking out of the box and income generation and throwing eggs and things like that at certain members of the Scottish Parliament. And then I thought, what a good idea, because then we can bring our community wardens in and we can fine £80 for littering everybody that threw an egg or whatever at that particular individual. I want to thank Councillor Nicholson for the work that he did, and it was a brilliant piece of work, I believe, from the Labour group at that particular time on the poverty policy that we had within the council, and we've certainly benefited a lot of our public in Dumfries and Galloway. With regard to Councillor James, when he talked about reduction in councillors, just to remind people, in 1997, when we moved to one unitary authority, we had before that 103 councillors in Dumfries and Galloway, and then in 2007 we went to 47, we're now down to 43. So we have had our cuts across the board in local councils. But I want to come back to something that Councillor Carruthers actually said when he said that we never put a budget forward. We don't want to come up with a budget because we know it would get voted down. Well, if you're trying to look after the public and you never brought a budget forward today to look after the public in Dumfries and Galloway, shame on you.
Councillor Sloan. No, there's people who have been waiting for some time. Yeah, you'll get the right to come back, but there are a number of people who've been waiting for some time to make a contribution. Councillor Sloan.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've just actually realised there is a slight advantage to being half deaf. I only have to listen to half the rubbish. I'm sure you're aware, Leader, I did not agree with not listening to the amendments today. I believed that under the democratic system, that anybody, not just Willie Scobie, not just Ronnie, anybody that wanted to put amendments should have been free to do so. You've made your decision, that's your right. That's your right, Chair. It's a very sad day. I mean, this is one of the harshest budgets I've seen in all my years in council, because it hits the most vulnerable. I mean, taking $750,000 off, support for learning, I think that's crazy. I think that's one of the first things we should be revisiting. There's no doubt that if you look at over the last 10, 11 years, Dumfries and Galloway has been hammered, absolutely hammered by cuts from the Scottish Nationalists. Because they are the common denominator, the Scottish National Government over the last 10 years. But now they also have their little friends down at council level to knock the final nails in the coffin. I really find it sad that we are going down this road. I accept your leadership, Chair. I do not lay this at your door in any way. The council has been forced by the SNP to go down this road.
Thank you, Councillor Sloan. Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. I must admit, when Councillor James started, I was a wee bit worried when he talked about lean. I thought I was maybe for out the door, but then he said the heavyweights at the end, so that sort of cheered me up a bit. I think a lot's been said about the cuts we are making. They are something. When I joined the council in '99, we used to have the opportunity to fight over what we were going to invest in. We haven't had that for the last 10 years. I think it's going to be hard for whoever does it. I think one of the things you said earlier was that the administration group was looking to review the way that the budget was brought forward. I think Councillor Carrs has given you that opportunity this next week, if his amendment is supported. But I have a couple of questions that I would like. The budget states that we had the problem with regard to £450,000 from previous budgets that we haven't addressed. Have we actually secured all the savings from this year's current budget? If not, how do we plan to actually do that within your budget? When we look through some of the papers, there is a great detail with regard to any cost being ERVS. That usually came out of the Change Fund. Do we have sufficient funds within the Change Fund, and have you made provision for that within your budget to actually cover the costs? The other one was, I note within the Chief Executive's 5.06 proposal that there are no costs associated with the proposal, and this proposal can be implemented within existing resources. Every other proposal that proposes a reduction in staff has ERVS costs. Can I take it from that there are no ERVS costs with this proposal from the Chief Executive?
Well, I'll ask the Chief Executive to answer on his proposal, but as I said, there will be a further paper which we can discuss in greater detail at a future meeting. On the issue of whether or not savings have been achieved, you'll be aware that reports go to committee on whether or not departments are meeting their savings targets. There have been problems, as I'm sure you're well aware, in EEI, and action has had to be taken in order to try and pull those in. There are also concerns, I admit, around the Change Fund, and this is one of the reasons why we cannot just spend balances just like that, because it could be that we had to supplement the Change Fund at some point if we were unable to meet the commitments of ERVS. I'll pass on to the Chief Executive, and he'll be able to say a little more about his proposal.
What it means that the cost saving will outweigh the costs of the ERVS scheme. All the ERVS has costs, but over the period of following practice by Audit Scotland, the savings far outweigh the costs up front, which is similar to all the ERVS schemes. Otherwise, they wouldn't be approved.
Can we take it from that there will be a £650,000 saving within the year, or will there be costs with ERVS? Because it says that will be met without any costs. On page 382, budget how much? No costs associated. Now, there are costs, because my understanding, people are entitled under our policy to added years and various other payments. So that statement in these papers is incorrect.
There will be costs, yes, and members will consider those coming up. but the overall savings, so that it's almost like the spend to save, we'll use funds to cover those in the period, but on a recurring basis, there will be no cost to the council budget moving forward because the savings aren't there. So if you want to play with the numbers, Ivor, yeah.
So what is the saving? Is it 650 this year or not? And if we aren't getting the full 650 this year because there are costs, what is the cost and what is the budget? Does this budget actually add up?
In accounting on the council budget, the saving that will be delivered was 650,000. Money will need to be applied to cover that period until the timing measure. So it'll be a timing measure of when the cost gets released. But in relation to the budget, the saving in totality will be 650,000. So if you want to get into the details of accountancy, which obviously you do, I'm happy to do so.
Can I suggest you do that with the meeting, Chief Executive? Okay. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. I think the point I was going to make has really passed, but somebody else has raised it again. It's about the council tax, and I don't know about anybody else, but I sort of find it really quite ironic that the crocodile tears about the lack of resource that is here. If we had taken a steady increase when we should have taken a steady increase all those years ago, when we didn't, we would then have £6 million more to spend. And I just remind people that sometimes you need to take quite tough decisions. And that includes, I'm afraid to say, I think, the whole business about compulsory redundancies. I've been on about this for years and years. The public out there do not understand why we have this mad arrangement of insisting that we have no compulsory redundancies in the public sector when they are facing it every day.
Councillor Davidson. I thought you indicated you wanted to speak. Councillor Carruthers.
The powder dry, Leader.
Thank you. Just thanks for giving me the chance to come back. Did Jeremy Corbyn present a budget to government? No. Did Richard Leonard do the same? No. Shame on them if that's the case. I think it's been very respectful up to now. To lower the standard of this council committee to this point is inappropriate, to say the least.
I would point out, though, that some of the procedures are different within local authorities, the Scottish Government and the UK Government. Having said that, had I been Richard Leonard's position, I might have taken a slightly different view. Okay. Are there any further comments? Councillor Marshall.
Chair, just to get back to the comments that were made about from the Conservative leader with regards to not submitting a budget because they thought it didn't have the numbers. Well, you actually do have the numbers. If you look at it now, you have, you do have the numbers if you actually meet with other groups. Yeah, so you could have still had that as well. And it'd be quite interesting, let's face it, it'd be quite interesting to actually see a rainbow coalition that has David James on one side and Councillor Scobie on the other. So bring it on,
Councillor Lever.
Yeah, listen to the debate and the comments coming from the Conservative group. It is a great pity that they didn't have time to actually draw up a budget, and kind of remind them a 3-year budget isn't a budget which takes 3 years to actually create. And is David James actually making a bid for leadership of this Tory group? I know he mentioned the Tory think tank. Well, looking at some of the ideas that have come forward, I think it's more a think saucer and a half full saucer at that.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
And I won't be long at all. I just want to read just one of the significant numbers of emails I've received this week from people across the region. It's from a teacher, and it says, "I cannot even imagine what it would be like in our schools with further cuts. When you see work colleagues in tears at break times, there is something very wrong with the support for both for staff and pupils. I sincerely hope councillors think long and hard before agreeing to such cuts in this region." I'll leave you with that thought.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, and I think it is a sad day, and when we're taking, as Councillor Sloan said, almost £750,000 out of in refocus and support for kids in educational needs, and that you have not taken my amendment today. I heard from Councillor Brody throwing budgets out a window. literally plays with his budgets, but, he had the opportunity to second my original budget, which he did not do, as did Councillor James. And I just wasn't quite sure where he was coming from. There would be a coalition with the two, Sean. I hate to think when the left and the right come together. However, Chair, as you are not taking my amendment today, I would like my dissent recorded.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. There will, of course, be a vote because there is a motion to accept the administration budget and there's a counter motion to... did you have the words of the counter motion?
Yep.
The amendment?
Yeah, the amendment, the motion is by the leader, supported by the deputy leader, to move the administration's budget, and the amendment proposed by Councillor Crothers, seconded by Councillor Nicholl, is not to support the administration budget and to allow the Conservative group and any other group or member who wishes to do so to bring forward a budget in a week's time. Or a budget or amendment.
So it's quite clear that in terms of this motion, that the administration budget will fall and the administration will therefore fall also. And you may get your wish, Councillor Crothers. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I just want to make it plain before we go to the vote. You also refused to take my amendment, and I would like my dissent recorded accordingly.
Okay, Councillor McGregor.
Sorry, I will be very brief, but I'm reaching the stage of disappointment. I think some members of the Chamber have brought forward some concerns about the budget and some ideas as to how we could change or tweak or make the budget more whole council. I appreciate that the administration is in a difficult position. However, if the administration's budget is voted through in the next 10 minutes, that is it. That is debate over. Those teachers will be cut. There will not be additional funding in roads. There will be a 4.7% rise in council tax, and I don't envy you for that, but I do think we have an opportunity here to not just die in a ditch, typical partisan lines of actually trying to spend the next 7 days, because we only got your budget on Tuesday night, and it's 485 pages. I've tried to get through most of it, but I haven't been able to get through it all. And I just wonder if the time hasn't come, with Brexit over the horizon, with teacher strikes now a possibility, that we shouldn't just be trying to work a little bit closer together to get a proper budget through together.
Well, when the Conservatives take over the administration, they can do so. I think Councillor Hislop wanted to say something.
Chair, it's just on standing orders. Will Councillor Nicholson and Scobie be allowed to record their dissent, as there is actually no amendment? Because usually you record the amendment and you don't have a seconder. You have denied them that right, so will their dissent be recorded?
Well, I think they have the opportunity to vote for your amendment, do they not?
So there will be no dissent recorded on the minute?
I think there's a difference between here we've got dissents on votes, but what they were asking to be recorded was their dissent at the decision of the chair, not to take their amendments. And I think if the chair is quite happy for that to be recorded in the minute, I don't have any problem with that.
Okay, I've got anybody further wanting to speak? If you would allow myself and Councillor Davidson the opportunity to sum up for our motion, and then we'll proceed to the vote.
Well, thank you, Leader. It has been a curious debate. It's swung wildly between being very solemn, which I think is correct, and frankly bizarre. And we want to reflect on how that has actually happened. But we also saw quite a strange situation where there was almost a budget being drafted by committee amongst the Conservative group in the room during the course of the debate, which is rather curious. And I think that we need to give that some consideration as well, because the choice-facing members, I think, is very clear. There is a budget on the table. No one has professed that it is a wonderful budget because it is a budget made in difficult times. No one has shied away from that, and we have been very open and clear about its implications and the reasons that we have got to this point. On the other hand, we have a delay of a week and a new administration of some description and a budget of, well, who knows what. It could be very sensible. It could be eminently sensible. I served in administration with Councillor Nicholl and Councillor McGregor. There were always plenty of things on which we agreed, and there were always plenty of things on which we disagreed, and we agreed where we agreed, and we agreed to disagree where we disagreed. There are almost too many agreements in that for it to make sense, but that is more or less because coalition is a difficult business, as we have heard from Councillor Sloan. Coalition is indeed a difficult business, but nevertheless, we managed to get through more or less. But then, of course, we have Councillor James, who I struggle to conceive occupies the same political party as Councillors McGregor and Nicholl, and indeed Councillor Carruthers. We have no idea, members, what sort of proposal will come forward as a result of that. And I think that consensus is the very last thing that it is likely to produce. Now, the pretext for Councillor Carruthers not producing a budget, which is absolutely his right and privilege, was that political differences would be such that it would not carry. He then went on to set out the sort of things that he would like to achieve. He should consider that everything that he set out there is indeed an area of political difference. But by what process does he mean to overcome those? Because if they remain his view, and others retain the views that they have, there will be no consensus on those measures. We will end up, in short, exactly back where we started, in this room, in a week's time, probably with the same budget that we have now in front of us. We will have proceeded no further. The fact of the matter is that we have as good a proposal in front of us as we are likely to come up with under the circumstances, for all of the reasons that the leader has set out in great detail. And in my view, we should proceed with that. I will say a word on coalition. I reflected that coalition is a difficult business. I've been in two. They come and go. My intention and hope is that this one persists because I believe it is the right thing for this region. I was going to say that it is founded on mutual respect, and then, of course, we heard from Councillor Sloan, it is in the greater part founded on mutual respect. That is certainly the case so far as my group is concerned. Indeed, they have been commendably disciplined today. Perhaps that means that I am more of a dictator than the leader. But it is my hope that the coalition will prevail and that its budget will pass for all the reasons that I have set out, and not least because it represents a sensible, viable way forward, which is balanced, which does not rely on reserves, which makes difficult decisions, doesn't glory in them or take pleasure in them, but nevertheless tries to resource the things that we set out and voted for by majority in this council as our priorities and commitments, the plan that we had to serve the region for 5 years. On that basis, still very happy to second the leader, and I hope that our budget will carry.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. I am grateful to him and his colleagues for the loyalty they have shown us, and indeed to some of my own colleagues, most of my own colleagues, for their loyalty. But it's absolutely be clear that I have lost the confidence of certainly one of the members of the Labour group. Unfortunately, another member of the group was suspended, and my party has been so dilatory, they have not been able to take the appropriate action, and that is something which angers a lot of us. But we are in a position where our party is the third party in the council now, and I appreciate that when we lost our majority, we would be in a situation where there could be a change of administration, and I'm prepared to accept that. I'm also prepared to enjoy the considerable amount of extra free time I might be having in the near future. But this budget process has been very difficult. There have been some extremely hard choices to make, and two different political groups have had to compromise with each other. Actually, that's something that negotiations require, is compromise. It's a pity some of our people involved in Brexit hadn't actually realised that. But when you bring people with different views together, you have to compromise, and you have to try and treat each other with respect. And we have done so in order to put together a competent set of proposals. We had all hoped that the transformation process that we set in motion last year would come up with considerably more savings and choices than it did. This budget includes efficiencies enabled by the application of new technologies, which will give our residents access to services online. We have looked at examples of good practice from other councils and sought to customise them for our situation, and we are streamlining both processes and our management structures. I think this budget has had a good airing today, although, as Councillor Davidson said, The contributions varied from the serious to some which I found quite difficult to follow. The development and application and success of these proposals will be reported to committee throughout the year if, of course, the budget is passed. In concluding this debate, however, I want to make points that go rather wider than this budget. Local government cannot continue to be at the bottom of the food chain when it comes to the distribution of public finance. If local government revenue budgets keep being cut back, we will see councils going to special measures. Some of our colleague councils across the country are very near to being special measures now. If councils do not have access to the funds they need to fix potholes and keep the streets tidy, our country is going to become more and more untidy and run down and dirty. If we can no longer afford to run leisure services, our population will become more unhealthy, both physically and mentally, and the NHS will come under increasing strain. Further stringent cuts to local authority budgets will threaten the quality of education offered to our children and young people if we are only able to afford what we are statutorily obliged to provide. Extremely important services such as youth work, which provide invaluable support to our young people, those aren't statutory. Further cuts to our budgets could provide a threat to those. We have avoided any cuts to this valued service in Dumfries and Galloway this time. But for how much longer can that go on if perpetually austerity continues? Across local authorities, we need to campaign vigorously for a fair settlement, for further discretionary tax-raising powers, ones which might be suitable for rural areas like ours, unlike transient visitor tax and the car parking levy. And we need to allow council to make their own decisions about the level of council tax they apply. There will, of course, be debates about levels of service versus levels of taxation. That's bound to be. Those are political choices. But these should be local debates, and they shouldn't be imposed by central government. It's been a pleasure being the leader of this council.
Proceed to the vote?
Indeed.
Yep. Okay. Leader?
Motion.
Deputy Leader?
Motion.
Councillor Bell?
Amendment.
Councillor Blake?
Amendment.
Councillor Brodie?
Motion.
Councillor Doogie Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor John Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Ian Crothers?
Amendment.
Councillor Karen Crothers?
Amendment.
Councillor Charteris? Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Dryborough?
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Giusti?
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman?
Motion.
Councillor Howie?
Motion.
Councillor Hislop? Councillor Ingalls? Councillor James? Councillor Johnston?
Amendment.
Councillor Lever?
Motion.
Councillor Little?
Motion.
Councillor McGregor? Councillor Maitland?
Motion.
Councillor Marshall?
Motion.
Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor McClelland?
Motion.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson?
Abstain.
Councillor Ronnie? Councillor Scobie? Councillor Sloan?
Motion.
Councillor Stitt?
Motion.
Councillor Surtees?
Motion.
Councillor Tate? Councillor Thompson?
Motion.
Councillor Wilson?
Motion.
Councillor Wood?
Motion.
Councillor Young?
Motion.
Let's check everyone's voted. The motion is carried 25 votes to 16 with one abstention.
Thank you, colleagues. Councillor Davidson, it looks as if you and I live to fight another day. Not with each other, I mean. Can we proceed to item number 7, which is the Dumfries and Galloway Council's preparation for the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union, and a report by the Director of Communities. This report updates elected members in respect of the Council's preparations for the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union. The report sets out the nature of the work undertaken, the planning assumptions which have informed those preparations, and the progress made to date. Martin Ogilvie and Andrew Reid are here to assist with any questions on the report which members may have. And can I open the meeting up to member debate? Councillor Driver.
Yes, Chair, and you know, first of all, to thank the officers for bringing this report forward in such a small timescale with such a huge issue as Brexit. I think what we see here is that it's no simple thing, this. However, we are looking at Dumfries and Galloway preparations for United Kingdom's exit for the European Union as not only ourselves, but how it affects our partners right across the region and right across the UK. It's just not any questions here, it's just to thank the officers for the work that they have actually done on this. I know that in the background that our Chief Executive has been working at a Scottish level as well, and hopefully we will come to a decision that will maybe either delay the Brexit process, in my opinion should happen, or even get to a second referendum.
Thank you. That's more of a comment rather than a question. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I welcome the report coming forward, and obviously from the west of the region there is particular concern regarding the ports of Cairnryan and indeed the residents of Cairnryan in what they have experienced in the past through maybe bad weather, lack of sailing, and the stack-up principle. Where we have seen the 751 used, and indeed Cairnryan, some of the residents blocked into their houses as a result, and this may have the same effect with the Brexit situation. We did get a briefing as members on Friday of last week, and I was pleased to hear that some of the concerns of the people of Cairnryan are going to be addressed. At least it's an option that we could use the existing Stranraer harbour and these pier in a short-term basis for a car park or a secure car park for many of these lorries, if that comes about. And I think that's an option that we have seriously got to look at. We also have to look at in terms of Brexit and indeed our connection with Northern Ireland, and that's to look at both the trunk roads of the A77 and the A75. And I know that we've had great support on the Irish side for the upgrading of both roads. I'm not suggesting that Brexit's going to bring about the dual carriageway of both the A77 and the A75, but I think we've got to use what we have in terms of the support there is for both to develop our connections with the Northern Ireland authorities. And I've had that discussion with Archie as to how we can move this forward. And I hope it is moved forward, that we do connect with Irish colleagues in terms of any Brexit discussions, and indeed how we progress or develop those discussions into something more tangible, so that we can have a strong lobbying group to go forward to maximise what indeed has been the forgotten corner of Scotland in terms of investment in our road and rail. So I do hope that we can develop that under the Brexit umbrella.
Thank you, Jim. Before the Chief Exec comes in, obviously the situation with Northern Ireland is also very close to our hearts in Dumfries and Galloway, and of course to South Ayrshire as well. And as part of the discussions that we had with APSI, we got involved with the Northern Ireland Local Government Association, the Chief Exec there, to look at what we can do to support each other moving forward in regards what's happening with the A77 75. I know there was a meeting last week between a couple of Northern Ireland councils and the Chief Exec, and perhaps the Chief Exec would like to take it further, but we are aiming to have another meeting, political meeting, and hopefully invite the 75 action group to that.
Happy to, that would minimum, and perhaps if Martin can give us an update on the Cairn Ryan issue, because it's the number one strategic issue identified in the Scottish Plan, which we would have responsibility of leading. So I think if I can cover the Northern Ireland situation, a twin track approach, obviously I think picking up on members, there are opportunities potentially from Brexit, as well as significant downside. We met with our colleagues from Antrim, the new unity that's been in place for 2 years now. We also invited our South Ayrshire colleagues because of the issues of transport connectivity and Cairn Ryan down. We had a very, very good discussion, and effectively it's not like rebuilding what we had in the past, but actually 10 years ago we had very strong links with our Northern Irish colleagues that stretched into our communities, not just in the North Channel Partnership. So we're looking to develop proposals to come back to members, and I should those around economic opportunities, tourism opportunities, cultural opportunities and lobbying opportunities, because obviously it's very important to Northern Irish and Southern Irish business that they don't leave dual carriageway to access Europe if they are going to go through Great Britain. And what we don't want is them to avoid coming through Scotland because they can have super ferries that take them straight into mainland Europe. So again, we'll bring that scoping paper back for members' consideration, and then a political meeting, and actually the A77, A75 is very high in their agenda. The other piece of work is what Councillor Dryber has referred to. I've commissioned a piece of work with the Northern Irish COSLA on what would be potential Brexit opportunities and city deal opportunities from borderlands and the big Irish, huge Irish deal moving forward. It's a small cost for a significant piece of work in which Dumfries and Galloway would lead for the west of Scotland. So again, that would come together in a report coming back to EEI committee for members' consideration. But I just wonder, Leader, if Martin would like to give us just an update on the Cairn Ryan, because obviously that's something that could hit us rather rapidly if we move towards a no Brexit deal.
So in terms of pure resilience emergency planning, the Cairn Ryan scenarios obviously just impacts our local authority primarily. I suppose we have been linking with South Ayrshire, but it's been something that's been a concern probably going back to early November. There are a number of unknown unknowns that we're still kind of developing, pursuing, researching almost on a daily basis. In terms of the more strategic picture, we know that there are companies with some of the largest roll-on, roll-off ferries ready to open up new routes from continental Europe directly into Dublin. These super ferries are nicknamed the Brexit Busters, and they are phenomenal when you see the size compared to the normal ferries that run currently between the mainland and Northern Ireland. The significance for us is that is an EU to EU route into Dublin, obviously, and with a soft border potentially in Northern Ireland, it would be easy for a number of the trucks to come across to the north, up to Belfast in Cairn Ryan. Current ferry capacity on the two P&O and Cairn Ryan routes are currently running at 50%, so there's capacity to pick up quite a lot of the extra traffic that may decide to use that route as an alternative. The other significant factor is the uncertainty around what the customs arrangements will be at Dublin for the traffic coming from Holyhead, and what the impact might be for hauliers based in the Midlands and the north of England in terms of their route selection. If when we know further details, if we find out there's going to be long delays on the Dublin side of the crossing to get through customs that they may have to put in place there for traffic coming from the United Kingdom, then operators may decide, if they're based up in to go up the M6 across to the Lake District and then across to 75. So there's still the potential for a lot of rerouting that we have been asking continually and liaising closely with the Department for Transport and Transport Scotland on in terms of their planning assumptions and their research and their intelligence. But of course, a lot of it is commercially sensitive because it comes from the ferry operators themselves. So we might just have to wait and see what decision is made, what the implications are, and what the commercial decisions on the routes and the capacities are before we know exactly what we're going to get. So with all that in mind, the only option we've had to do is plan for the reasonable worst case scenario. So we've been looking to put in place with partners like Transport Scotland, Police Scotland and the Fire and Rescue Service pretty a robust set of options looking at ferry traffic not having to stack, which is the arrangement that we had, the Operation Stack arrangement was when there's for no sailings due to primarily bad weather, but when there's a congestion issue around Stranraer and Cairnryan and the A751, the link route which is currently used. A whole series of alternatives have been considered in depth by a range of agencies over the last 3 months, many of which have been looked at, considered and ruled out. We're currently working up a preferred option, which I'm confident we'll have in place. The preferred option is currently subject to discussions between a company and Transport Scotland, but we take the pressure off the A751 and take the pressure off the trunk roads, and it's certainly the preferred option of both Police Scotland and the Scotland Fire Rescue Service and the resilience community in terms of what we might have them to be planning for. So that's an update on the operational matter around Cairnryan and some of the uncertainty that we still have as a resilience community and some of the options that we've developed to try and be ready for any eventuality.
I've got Councillor Hagman, Councillor James, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Maitland and Councillor Ferguson waiting. So Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I just wanted to really make a comment and thank officers for taking on board a concern that I had as Chair of the Harbours Committee. I am a duty holder for the harbours, and certainly the Loch Ryan currently is under control, so to speak, of the Council. Now, the MCA for the Maritime Coastal Agency and the Council have been working in terms of safety of our harbour. So I would just like to first of all thank officers for taking on board my concerns, because I'm looking at the list here and the MCA, the Maritime Coastal Agency, isn't down here because obviously there's operational issues, but we also have to bear in mind that there's safety issues, and it's not just myself that's a duty holder. There's actually 7 members of the Harbour Subcommittee, and while it may not be we may not have a key role in this going forward, I would appreciate, and I have requested and I've had it confirmed, that we will be kept up to date with how we're going to be moving this forward as a council. So I'd just like to thank officers for acknowledging that and taking that forward as well.
Just to give extra assurance that around the strategic resilience partnership that I chair, the Coast Guard sit around there as well. So we're connected at all levels. And when we stand up the multi-agency coordinating centre, as outlined in page 53, that will have all the representatives sitting around it, and I will sit there as well, so chair. So therefore I think it's about, we'll have constant communication with members who need to know to make sure that you have the assurances that you need.
I think that's really helpful to know, and certainly Dumfries and Galloway Council and our lead officers have been working with the MCA for several years now, trying to find a resolution for our harbour revision order, and actually I believe that this is the point that we need to get this finally put in place, because there is going to be an impact for the future. And I've asked officers if we can actually look at that, because the MCA haven't always come and met us round the table as we present the responsibilities of what we as a council are facing at the moment.
Councillor James.
Thank you. I didn't actually ask to speak on this item, but just to let everyone know, I am aware that there are like 29 days. I'm just looking forward to this great anticipation of the happy day when we have a clean break from Europe and all the opportunities that will give us, and if we get it out at the end of the next month, the certainty and clarity that will give us. Thank you.
Thank you. Personally, I'm looking forward to a people's vote. Councillor Wilson.
I'm anticipating something not quite clarity and probably not happiness. I mean, as talks about people's vote, I think people know that I'm not in favour of people's vote. However, I think that the only thing that is clear is that there's no agreement on how the UK will actually leave the European Union. I mean, interestingly enough, the Monster Raven Laney party said that they think there should be an al dente Brexit, and I think that that is probably a good description of exactly where we're at the moment. Given seriously that actually, as a country, as organisations, as businesses, as communities, as public services, we don't actually know how we are going to leave the European Union. Some people may be looking forward to that day, some people may not. But in terms of running services, in terms of the good work that's been done here, we don't actually know what the reality will be. We don't know how much of a bad story it will be, because I don't see many positives at the moment. I think that there's a need for policy and resources to consider the update. I believe it's the 13th or 14th of next month that policy and resources meet. I think there's a need for an update there, because I would certainly hope that Parliament is able to come together and come to an agreement on how we're going to leave the European Union. Gail McGregor's laughing. I know it's probably not going to happen, but I would very much hope that with 2 weeks before, we meet for policy and resources approximately 2 weeks before we leave the European Union, I would certainly hope we have much better clarity on exactly how we're going to leave the European Union, so that hopefully the worst case scenarios that are in this paper are not realised, but certainly we can step up planning for any that we think may occur. I'd be grateful if we could get assurance for an update and a paper at policy and resources.
Yes, I think that's probably a good idea, that things may have progressed, maybe will have progressed by then, that we could have an update. Yeah.
Just to give you assurance that COSLA's leading a piece of work at the moment in which is pulling together the policy issues with the operational issues. Now that's quite a challenge. So therefore, I think at that point we'd be able to bring that matrix to you, which would identify perhaps what we would be asking as a council for government to consider when and if funds become available. But obviously I'll consult with senior members about the shape of that paper and what would be possible for PNR, because we might not have actually moved any further forward by then. But certainly there's a piece of work being put by COSLA that would actually inform a debate at Policy and Resources, which is connecting all of the policy implications, medium and long term, with what operationally it might mean for local authorities in detail. So that might form the basis of a debate and perhaps an ask from this council that I could then take back, and I'm sure that Councillor McGregor would take back to COSLA.
Councillor Maitland.
I suppose really I read these things, and particularly with respect to the environmental health issues, I tremble for the businesses in my ward and right across Dumfries and Galloway. I'm nervous. I think there are time delays and extra paperwork, and I understand that actually it doesn't really appear in the business section of this. But people don't realise the impact of apparently extremely small changes in administrative burden. It has an astonishing ripple effect. And I make no mistake, I make absolutely no apology for saying I am nervous on two bases. There is a suggestion here, which I wasn't absolutely sure about what was meant by Dumfries Galloway will monitor and enforce any unfair and anti-competitive business practices that emerge. Could I just have a sentence to explain what that actually means?
That's basically about businesses exploiting Brexit, so putting prices up across the region for certain supplies and services that other communities require or other businesses require to carry out their days.
And may I come back and just ask, what could we possibly do about it?
It would be a task for the trading standards, so they would monitor it in line with trading standards, and they would sort of liaise with the companies, identify the practice, and then whatever legislation they can apply would apply to those companies being unfair.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland, does that answer your question? Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Leader. Two things. One, I think Martin touched on the last time he gave us a report, and quite rightly the focus is on Cairnryan, but everybody come off the ferry at Cairnryan is already in the United Kingdom. What about, or what are we putting in place along the coast, or what are the governments intending to put in place along the coast to stop non-UK citizens or people who have not already gone through a border process actually getting in at the other small ports along the coast? And I say that because I'm not a fan of Brexit, as you know. I'm a big fan of free movement, but the free movement has to be a moderate free movement, I think, is probably the best way of putting it. So that was the one question. But the second more important question for me is it's about the recruitment and retention. And quite rightly, the report is focusing on
council staff. But given the nature of the region, then there are a number of council staff, a significant number of council staff and NHS staff and private independent sector staff who've got partners or husbands, wives in another workplace area who may not have settled status. So how do we tie them all together? Because we're not going to get that real figure until the great day of judgment comes. And so is there a way that we could be ensuring that we're talking to, I know Gavin is talking to the NHS about this, for example, but also other businesses, the fish people down at Kakubri, for example, because are we going to really make people choose between staying here or going with their partner back somewhere else? And I think we need some idea, if we can get it, on just exactly what the extent of that is. It might be quite small, actually, but we don't know.
I think you've hit a good point that we are coordinating around the issues of settled status. Obviously, they'll determine in the nature of the deal as to how that moves forward. But we are gathering data. I think one of the issues we had at COSLA, and I looked to Leader and Councillor McGregor, the last time was our systems were never designed to record them because there was no distinction between an EU citizen and a British citizen. The NHS has done considerable work about the number of EU citizens, and that's a report that's just crossed my desk. In local government, what we do know is a big exposure for that is actually in the big cities, Glasgow and Edinburgh, the big exposure. So at the moment, pulling together that detail and that rationale, but at a local level, we've got a fairly good handle because I lead nationally, but Jeff Ace leads nationally for the NHS on and reports into me. So I think we're ahead of the game. I think our risk is potentially a flip side is how do our farms get the European labour that they rely on over this summer? And that's an issue that Martin and I are very focused upon. That's probably the biggest immediate risk to us, is if we rely on about 12,000 over the summer period. So if it's only 10,000, is that 8 to 10% of our produce not going to leave the land? And again, it exasperates the food shortage from abroad. On the security issue, yes, it's something that the Assistant Chief Constable and I have had many discussion about, because obviously the border control is a reserved matter to Westminster, and we're not having the greatest of conversations nationally in relation to that. But in the police contingency plan, when the police were talking about additional 800 officers, that was because we believe we'll have to fill that gap in the short term until we get more arrangements. So part of the contingency plan police are taking forward covers that additional presence that will be needed around our harbours if it's not filled by the border force from Westminster. So we're pulling, all that is being considered. But I'd say that we've probably got a better handle here because we're not as exposed as other areas, but obviously there's a significant risk. And I think one of the things that we will develop will be the size of the risk if we have a no Brexit over the summer for our farms, etc., that do rely on foreign labour over the summer. Because, and again, we have a motion coming which starts to indicate some of the immediate concerns that we'd have around there. So it's one we're keeping very much an eye on, and one that I met with the Minister on Friday, particularly about impacts on social care. That actually there's a real risk, particularly around Glasgow, that has already been identified, that they could struggle to have staff available to meet the social care needs over the summer. So again, it's another risk that we're nationally looking at.
Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. It's more the personal issues that's kind of annoying me here. EU nationals have been living here for 5 years or more are eligible for EU settled status. Less than 5 years have got to apply for pre-settled status, whatever that is, and those that didn't apply will be required to leave by 31st of December 2030. Is that similar to what the EU is doing with our residents over there? Because it seems, given the history of the government down south, what they done with the immigrants from Jamaica in the late 40s, they're shipping them back without considering anything. I hope the same's not going to happen here, because that was a disgrace. I noticed also that you're setting up a website for these people, and you've got to advertise that in the papers as well. And I think it's good that you're doing as much for them. But planning assumption, returnees, potential for UK nationals to return from the EU and reside in our region. Is it a case of if these people are sick and require medical attention, they'll be shipped back to here? That's what it looks like. That's all I've got. It's just a question of... Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So I can take sorry, on the EU settlement scheme, just to maybe provide a clarity in regards to settled status and pre-settled status. If EU nationals have been here for 5 years, they achieve settled status. Those who've been less than 5 years, they get accredited with pre-settled status until such a point that they've been in the UK for 5 years. Then they'll be upgraded or amended to settled status. So there's only a difference between the time that they're required to be here. Just on the information we have, the 100,000 that have been through the pilot scheme on the EU settlement status, they've all been granted settled status. There's been no rejections in regards to the current scheme as it's applied in the pilot area, and they don't anticipate there to be any issues coming up. So there should be a fairly comfortable process. With regards to marketing, the government will be running a marketing campaign throughout March, and we'll start seeing more and more of that come forward, ready for the scheme, which will officially open fully on the 31st of March, the 29th of March. Those people applying after the 29th of March will not be required to pay for that application. I'm just trying to see if I've caught everything. And Martin will pick up on the returnees.
Gail, did you have some information?
Sorry, it was just to pick up on UK citizens in EU countries. I mean, obviously, each individual member state will have its own personal arrangements, and I think they're working through that at the moment. As an example, France have guaranteed UK citizens currently living in the EU that under a deal scenario, they would be as protected as our EU citizens are in the UK, but would have to go through a similar process of applying to sort of remain. If there's a no-deal scenario, all bets are off, and they simply don't know at the moment. But I think it's very fair to say that the French system and the Belgium system just now, which are the two that I'm aware of, would charge UK citizens living in the EU a fairly significant amount to either have a temporary residence or a more permanent residence. And if they go along the lines of what's called a carte séjour, there would be a significant fee for that, and they would have to evidence income or money in the bank. So I think yesterday's amendment from Alberto Costa is probably a fairly significant one, because it is trying to secure the rights of UK citizens within the EU, but also EU citizens within the UK, and a reciprocal arrangement. So I think yesterday's amendment will hopefully be fairly significant.
Thanks for that. Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Leader. We have a number of relatively small-scale food and drink producers. At the present moment, they can export to the EU without the requirement for an export health certificate. However, the prospect is that in future they will require certification to export to the 27 remaining EU countries. These certificates, currently, I believe, we charge £71 for them. Now, can you imagine the impact on a small-scale producer of having to pay for these additional certificates? Someone, for instance, who is exporting 1 pallet of whisky, and for every pallet consignment, £71 is required to be paid. That very much eats into profit margins.
Yes, that and wider risks, where the Scottish Government, through its SCORE process, is doing deep dives into this, and one of the issues they've identified is exactly that. There's also the fact that even if we did those export certificates, France may not accept them. That's a huge risk, that even if we did it. But actually, part of the scheme and the funding that was referred to in the paper is actually about how the Scottish Government would then apply that funding perhaps not for us not to charge for those certificates. So very much aware of those issues, but there's a whole raft of other veterinary certificates, etc., that at the moment we have no idea whether or not, because it would require all of the EU countries to agree to accept it. And we know from the past, whenever you give perhaps France the opportunity not to, there's a pretty good chance we could end up in dispute. But it's part of the wider discussions. We're very much focused. I think the other one for members is around the impact on small business, that we've been very much focused on. The big companies have been paying this for years, but many small businesses will have no idea where the supply chain comes from because they're not geared up for that. So one of the issues we're trying to get into is that deep dive into what's the implications, and actually getting out there now in March is a bit late, but actually it's a real issue for our businesses that they might find that some of the supplies that they've been relying on are actually European and they didn't know. So I think, again, it's something, how do we support those businesses to understand and do those checks? And it's part of the Scottish Government publicity that will come out starting from the 1st about making sure that small business really has a look at where its stuff comes from, because there could be we're anticipating an up to a 6-week delay beyond what you normally have. Now, for us, some of our small businesses, that could be a huge going concern impact for them. And again, it's the work we're doing, local economy, about how could the council and Scottish Enterprise and others help support their cash flow through that period, if that does become the case. So again, we can bring together all that work that COSLA and ourselves are leading on, perhaps to P&R for debate next month.
Well, there's no other speakers. I'm advised that lunch is here and there are sandwiches and tray bakes in room 2. So I suggest we have half an hour of a recess, a comfort break, and then we come back to hopefully deal with the remaining issues in fairly rapid succession. Okay, colleagues, shall we resume? Ding ding. Well, sorry, let's resume. It's just been, Ron pointed out to me that we were asked to note the work and note from the previous one. Are we happy to note? Okay. Okay, if we can go on to 8, which is a notice of motion on leaving the EU. Nick Evans is here to speak to the report if necessary, but as the covering report is purely procedural, I don't suppose there will be anything on that. Members are asked to consider the terms of the notice of motion proposed by Councillor Dougie Campbell and seconded by Councillor Archie Driver, as set out in Appendix 1 to the report. And if people don't have any questions about the procedure, can I invite Councillor Dougie Campbell to introduce this motion?
Thank you, Leader. Members, EU migrants have enriched our lives and widened our cultural horizons. Losing them would leave Scotland a narrower place. Those aren't my words, but words that came from the Scottish Parliament last year. Since being elected in 2017, I've seen clear evidence of previously settled EU citizens leaving our region, and it's likely that this will increase in the coming months if Brexit transpires. In June 2016, the day after the EU referendum, our First Minister said to our EU citizens, "You remain welcome here. Scotland is your home and your contribution is valued." Yet even today, only 4 weeks to go, we still don't know the outcome of Brexit negotiations. If you're an EU citizen living in our region, right now, it must be a particularly worrying time. Last month, the Galloway newspaper published a story about a French woman who has lived in Gatehouse for over 25 years. The referendum has left her feeling unwelcome, and the requirement to apply after all these years for settled status has left her justifiably angry. She considers herself Scottish, but cherishes her EU citizenship, which many of us in this room also do. The entire settled status process has created a chill amongst EU citizens fearful of an aggressive UK immigration policy. On the 26th of January, I organised an open meeting for EU citizens living in Galloway and their employers to provide them with information and support from the Scottish Parliament, the Council and citizens' advice. There was a large turnout of EU nationals with many moving and powerful stories. Take, for example, the lady who came here from Spain 35 years ago. Her children were born here and she now has 2 grandchildren who are at school in my ward. She's worried about travelling to Spain to visit relatives in case she isn't allowed to return and cited the Windrush scandal as the reason. Now, some might think her fears are irrational, but can you really blame her for feeling that way? In 2017, during my election campaign, I met a Polish couple working in a local processing plant. Initially only intending to come for a short period, they decided to stay and bring up their children as Polish Scots. When I met them, though, they were thinking about returning to Poland as they no longer felt welcome. When I went back to see them recently, they'd gone. It makes me so sad that a referendum result that they were not allowed to vote on had this effect. But what of the economic effect? Recent findings from Holyrood's Europe External Relations Committee state that EU citizens working in Scotland have increased the size of our working population, with each individual contributing £10,400 on average in government revenue. But CBI Scotland states, post-Brexit, there's a real prospect that EU immigration will reduce by as much as 4/5, which they describe as an act of economic vandalism. Compounding this, Westminster has recommended a migrant salary threshold of £30,000 for future workers. The CBI have been clear that this will prevent access to vital overseas labour and skills. Can we really afford to make it more difficult for EU migrants to come and work here? CBI Scotland have highlighted the triple effect facing Scotland's businesses: an ageing workforce, EU workers returning home, and firms being unable to compete with the wages and salaries offered elsewhere in the UK. Their research has found that £23,800 is the average salary in Scotland, 21% below the 30,000 threshold. And given this, I think we should be worried. Take my ward, which Councillor Maitland alluded to earlier on. In Kirkcudbright, we have a major scallop port, with boats crewed by a significant number of EU workers. The owners of West Coast Sea Products have already spoken about their fears for the EU exporting business. Seafood processing in Kirkcudbright accounts for around 100 jobs, with EU employees comprising about 30% of that workforce. It would be disastrous for the local economy if this sector was to fold. Members, it's clear we risk losing EU nationals' contribution to our already fragile regional economy. That's why we must call on the Secretary of State for Scotland to recognise the disastrous impact to our region and ensure specific employment needs are met by removing the 30,000 salary threshold. Our public services rely on our EU workforce, with both the Council and the NHS already struggling to recruit and retain posts. If the UK-wide immigration policy fails to recognise the needs of our region, with our declining workforce and our rapidly ageing population placing huge demands on services in future, then we will have a major disadvantage both now and in the years to come. I really hope that all members will support this motion to say to our remaining EU citizens, you are welcome here, we value your contribution to Dumfries and Galloway, and we want you to stay. To fail to do this, I believe, would reflect badly on us as a council and be an abdication of our responsibility to acknowledge the invaluable contribution our EU citizens make. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks very much, Leader, and I'm pleased that Councillor Campbell brought this motion forward, because recently my father-in-law died on Sunday, and in his last 4 weeks in hospital he had a Lithuanian nurse, a Polish nurse, a Czechoslovakian nurse, as well as a Canadian nurse. There was even somebody for Fife, but they're not under the same constraints as anybody for the EU. When he got home, we had to get an NHS bed delivered, and it was delivered by a Dutch driver. And I think in the last 4 weeks of his life, he was very well looked after by the NHS and by the carers that were in his community. Again, others being Polish carers as well. So I think this motion, I believe personally, is right to come here and to show my appreciation, certainly my family's appreciation, of what that international community actually did for the benefit of my father-in-law, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Thanks for that. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I think yesterday's developments at Westminster with the motion put forward by Alberto Costa goes a good part of the way to addressing the issues of people remaining within the UK after Brexit. I fully understand, with my dealings with business people in the area, the effect it would have if we lost these people who have been a fantastic asset to our region. I think as well with this motion that's going forward, it's received cross-party support, it's got government support, it's got SNP and Labour support, it's even got support of the ERG, so it looks like it is going to go through. And I think after the comments David Mundell made yesterday, he's well aware of this and very supportive of this motion as well. So I think to lobby him on that fact is perhaps unnecessary, but it would certainly do no harm. But equally, I would actually like to see the 30,000 threshold removed from non-EU migrants as well. We spend an awful lot of time and money educating students in Scotland, and these students cannot stay in Scotland because they can't get a job earning over the £30,000 threshold. The whole thing seems ludicrous. I would remove the £30,000 threshold from all immigration. I've really not got a problem with that, and it would be a brilliant asset for our country if we could get these people to stay. But the other aspect of it as well, as alluded to by Councillor McGregor earlier as well, I think it's important that if you do send your letter forward, that you actually mention the fact that there's people from Dumfries and Galloway living in the EU as well, and I think they should be lobbying to try and make sure that they're protected too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Leader. I think I would echo much of what Councillor Johnson's actually just said. I think that the recommendations could do to be strengthened just to do that lobbying. But certainly it's nice that even though earlier on we maybe couldn't come to a sort of consensus, certainly I think that on all divisive issues of immigration, this chamber might actually come to a little bit of consensus on actually making sure that the human element of it, which I think quite often is forgotten, that we actually start to make some positive changes. I had a friend at university who is Malaysian but lived in Singapore before coming here, and spent 4 years and became a chemist. Wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do, and she could not find a job that was going to pay her £30,000 a year, and ended up leaving and returning home. And she actually is still struggling to find a job returning home. And I think that the threshold doesn't work. It doesn't work for public services. It doesn't work for businesses. And certainly I think we should do all that we can to lobby to see some positive changes. Because it's not an immigration issue. It's actually a matter for communities. It's a matter for businesses. It's a matter for public services.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the £30,000 limit is a bad idea. People who supported Brexit, they wanted a points-based, time-limited work permits, so we control the people that we want to come here for the time we want them to come here. The article in the paper, I mean, we should separate out, there probably are some deserving cases here, but that wasn't one of them. As far as I understood the claims in the paper, the lady was not prepared to pay £65 in 2020 as a one-off payment. That's less than I would have to pay for a passport to visit her country. So I just think that was a ridiculous story. Devaluation in the pound and being in Poland is responsible for pretty much all the Polish people going back to Poland, I would say, more than the case mentioned. The EU is responsible for this uncertainty because, as I understand it, we made fairly generous terms offer at the start, and we were told nothing is agreed till everything is agreed. Then that fell away when it came to the discussion around the 39 billion, because apparently that's paid whatever's agreed, or maybe nothing's agreed. So this is the why should we unilaterally give people safe haven here and leave our people abroad in the lurch? I mean, we give unilateral concessions across the board and got nothing back from the return. So we're in an era of full employment, something that all of us, especially the so-called Labour Party, should really welcome. And that means that Dumfries and Galloway is going to have to compete within the UK. Because don't forget, we've had 20 years of unprecedented immigration into the UK. That's 300,000 people a year for 20 years, plus on top of that population growth, and our population has remained static. Now, personally, I don't really have a problem with that, but from what I hear, people want to have more immigration into D&G. Well, they've had their chance for 20 years, it hasn't worked, and surely we need to look at ourselves why people are not coming. At the moment, English people are not coming here because of the threat of independence, and I think they need to be as welcome as Polish people. So let's just not pretend that our problems are caused by matters outside those that we can affect, which is what this does, as is quite often the case in this chamber.
Councillor Wilson.
Apologies, Leader, I maybe spoke too soon when I mentioned consensus, but I have to say, because I have to say something. David J., you're such an ignorant man.
I don't want to apologise. I do know that Adam feels very strongly about it, so I would point out that I probably am less ignorant than some people in the room, having had to pay and go through all the due diligence in different countries where I've lived abroad, and had to face the consequences of having a work permit removed. And I've bought into that. I've visited and lived in these countries without any demand that I should actually have a say in how they make their decisions there. I felt I was a guest. I enjoyed the countries, and many people come here for the predominantly economic benefit should think likewise to me. But I mean, I think it's right. I don't mind people speaking out.
Councillor Davidson.
I'm going to take a deep breath before I do this, because there is one aspect of this in which I find myself agreeing with Councillor James, which is that there is an underlying issue with Scottish population, which has been declining for some considerable time. It was the subject of quite significant work by the then Scottish Executive, which I think, Leader, you were then a member of, in fact, because it was a longer-standing and more deeply seated issue. Population decline is a problem in Scotland, which I would suggest is not necessarily an issue in other parts of the UK, certainly not in England, certainly not in the southeast of England. But I think that where I would start to differ quite significantly from Councillor James, just in case anyone was getting terribly worried, is that we need to recognise that while we have to look very seriously at the underlying structural problems that I think have given rise to the fall in population, and it's particularly marked in West Coast authorities in Scotland. There's now a growing east-west split, which is again of interest. We also need to recognise that what is possibly going to happen as a result of whatever deal we get and the decisions that EU nationals may take, and in some cases I think demonstrably have already taken in response to the uncertainty and where they might end up, runs the risk of exacerbating the underlying issues even more significantly. At the moment, if I understand correctly, forward population growth in Scotland is projected to result solely from net inwards migration. So we're not making new people, we're attracting them in. And if something happens, and Brexit is a thing which is happening, and it is, I think, quite clearly a potential risk to a proportion of that net inward migration, it stands to reason that we must address that and look at it seriously, admittedly at the same time as we need to look very carefully at the underlying structural and policy reasons why there are maybe areas of the country which are less attractive, or which are experiencing more difficulty in hanging on to their young people, or if the young people go away, they don't come back. And those are all things we need to look at, and to that extent, I agree with Councillor James on that point. But we shouldn't say that it is one thing or the other, because we are also faced, so far as I'm concerned, with Brexit posing an additional and immediate potential shock. And that is, I think, where actually there should be a degree of consensus. There are two pieces of work we need to do here. There is the one of natural population stasis, or in our case, the demographic challenge, actually, which shows population declining, ultimately. And there is the second one, which is a greater exacerbating factor, the additional shock that EU citizens leaving, potentially en masse, might present us in making it that much more difficult to do anything which grows our population in the long term. It's much more difficult to grow it from an even lower base than that which you started. Perhaps a slightly roundabout way of suggesting that, in fact, there is a degree, or there ought to be a degree of consensus here, no matter how inexpertly or brutally it might have been expressed to some degree. There are elements, I think, of truth and validity in both of these positions, But we need to look at them and treat with both of them, I think, on their merits. Some of that work's already ongoing. The 7 West Coast local authorities are already forming a grouping in COSLA to look at some of the underlying problems with West Coast depopulation. But at the same time, we also have to consider the very valid points that Councillor Campbell has raised about the immediate problem facing us with the decisions that EU migrants may decide to take. EU migrants, I beg your pardon, EU citizens may decide to make after the 29th of March. The two are, I think, in no ways to be considered in separately, the one from the other. I think we have to consider them in the round.
Thank you. Councillor McKee.
I just, on the radio, I think it was last week, the unemployment rate in this area for youngsters leaving school is the highest in Scotland. So we've got issues here where we need to create employment and training for the youngsters. It's not just as simple as that. With regards to the people in the other areas, it's quite interesting actually. There was a lady who was taking out citizenship a few months ago, and she was from Germany, and she couldn't have dual citizenship. She'd either have British citizenship or German citizenship. She couldn't have both. But other countries seem to be okay with a joint citizenship. So it's an interesting aspect that as well. But I think we've got to encourage the people that's here to stay here. And just as a side, the number of visitors that were here, for you spoke about the skating competition, Elaine. That attracts over 1,000 people. You got parents, about 1,000 parents plus 1,000 kids are all here. They all thoroughly enjoy coming here. They've done it for about the last 10 years, I think it is, if not longer. And they thoroughly enjoy coming here. So the area is well liked. It's just what we can do to keep them here.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Leader, for letting me in. Just a couple of things. I mean, the NHS situation is well documented, and again, as we talked about earlier in the Brexit stuff, mitigation things are trying to get put in place, but things don't look that great there. Like Archie's relatives, my own personal experience was a multitude of different nationalities looked after me in hospital, and for that I'll be eternally grateful. But the two things that are really getting at me here, and I think come to the crux of what Doug is getting at in his motion here, the £30,000 threshold is set in London. 30,000 in London is a totally different ball game for 30,000 wage in Dumfries and Galloway. Because 30,000 in London, you don't buy very much with your 30,000, but the roles that you fulfil down there to earn 30,000 are nowhere near the roles that you have to do here to get 30,000. And I think that's a big bit. And the other thing is that I'm not having sympathy for David Mundell here, don't get me the wrong for a minute, right? But we've got two MPs who haven't fought our corner in terms of Brexit. Right? They've continually voted against what their citizens' mandate was in the referendum on Europe, was to remain. They have consistently stayed. They voted to go with the government, to get out and everything else. At no time can I remember either of them actually speaking up for the people of Dumfries and Galloway. And I think if we Doug's approval and Archie's approval, I would actually like to include Alistair Jack into that there, because we need to lobby both of them. Because he seems to be closer to the ERG than the Secretary of State for Scotland does.
Councillor McLaren.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Leader, it's going back to this 30,000 threshold on salary, and I really would like to just emphasise how crucial and important that is, and it's following on as well from Councillor Johnson's point. But we're hoping that Borderlands comes into place in the very near future, in the next few years. And if we're looking to take on our graduates that are graduating from the universities in Scotland, it's unlikely that you would be able to pay £30,000. But these are
qualified young technical people that we want to work in this region. Now, if they're studying in our universities, we can't be throwing out 30 to 40% of the students because they're EU nationals. We've got to get rid of this 30,000 threshold. And as Councillor Ferguson says, maybe 30,000 is applicable in the southeast of England. It's certainly not applicable here. It's actually, it would be very restrictive in our area, and we really need to do the most we can, and if that's getting David Mundell and Alistair Jack on board, we've got to try and get both on board, I believe.
Councillor Dougie Campbell.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be very brief. I have to say I very much welcome the contribution by Councillor Johnson, and I would not disagree with the proposal that the threshold should be removed for all nationalities, albeit we have a significant EU workforce here at the present time who we don't want to leave. And also the proposal by Andy Ferguson that we include our MPs as well in terms of lobbying in relation to this motion. And, you know, I think we're facing a perfect storm here in Dumfries and Galloway, and we have to face up to that. Councillor James might not like that, but this is the reality. We have a declining workforce, we have an ageing population, and we have the consequences of Brexit. We have to face up to that, and we need to think about the future prosperity of our region in the face of these particular challenges.
I don't think there are any other speakers, so Councillor Jack.
Could I propose an amendment?
Okay, what's going on? He's able to, I presume, yes.
So I propose that we lament the lack of EU assistance in allaying the fears of their own citizens here in Dumfries and Galloway.
Again, is that in addition to the rest of the motion, or is that replacing part of it?
That'll be added to the letter at the back here, the notice of motion.
Okay, so you want that ahead. Okay. I'm going to ask Councillor Campbell and Councillor Driver if they would accept that. No, they're not.
I'm happy to accept what Councillor Johnson said and what Councillor Ferguson said, but I'm not. You're
not prepared to accept that. Councillor McGregor.
Sorry, it was just to pick up on a comment that Councillor Johnson made, and I think it was probably sort of designed to be marginally incorporated within the notice of motion in respect of UK citizens from the region who are living and working within the EU. We would expect to lobby on their behalf as well, and I think, just loosely agreeing with Councillor James, I'm very aware at the moment that France, under a deal scenario, not a no-deal scenario, but under a deal scenario, are intending to charge UK citizens living and working there £300 to get through their bureaucratic process, whereas we've waived the £60 fee over here. So I think our European partners are not always as kind to our UK citizens as we think they are. I will leave that there, but I do think it would be important, given that the nature of the motion yesterday, and let's be honest, this council does not have a huge amount of power in swaying government policy on a £30,000 limit, but I think we can use that power to our best advantage and piggyback on this amendment yesterday, which has had cross-party support across the whole of Parliament yesterday, to look at a reciprocal arrangement for both EU citizens in the UK and UK citizens in the EU. And I think we need to incorporate a reciprocal within the motion if at all possible. Because we do have British citizens from Dumfries and Galloway who live and work in the EU, and they seem to get lost.
Do you have a suggestion of an amendment how to include that?
Well, I mean, I think in virtually every paragraph it mentions EU citizens living in our region, and I think we just need to put in one of the paragraphs that the rights of UK citizens from Dumfries and Galloway living and working in the EU will also be a consideration when looking at government policy on immigration.
Thanks. Well, actually, I have a relative who's in exactly that position, but who's found total intransigence with the Home Office trying to get back. So, because she's got a condition, She's been in Spain now for nearly 40 years, but maintained a British citizenship all the way through it. So I'm a bit wary about that, Gail. Well, I agree with your principle. Yes, I think it's one of these things that's dangerous.
Councillor Driver.
Thank you very much, and taking into consideration what Councillor McGregor actually said there, I mean, I've got no problem if Councillor Campbell is happy with putting a line in and saying that we are also wishing that the health and well-being of our Dumfries and Galloway people who are working in the EU be looked at as well, or words to that effect. I mean, it's just one of those things where we don't want to forget that we do have Dumfries and Galloway people working in Europe, but the main emphasis of this motion is about the 30k headline.
Councillor Campbell.
Well, I realised this morning I was sort of entering the world of national politics. I realised it was going to become international. I don't have any major issue with Councillor McGregor's proposal. What I don't want to do is to lose the thrust of this motion. This is about EU citizens living in Dumfries and Galloway, and it's about saying to them, we want you to stay. I don't want to see cases like the Polish family that I referred to. And it's about this perfect storm that I referred to that we have to face up to. But with an appropriate form of words, I'm happy to incorporate the proposal from Councillor McGregor.
Chief Executive, Mr. Citizen.
If members in agreement, we're happy to work with the proposer and seconder on appropriate words and share them with Councillor McGregor. If we're happy after the meeting.
Content with that as a way forward? Yes, great. Good. Sorry, Councillor Hessel.
Chair, it's on another matter. There were comments made about a member. I don't think that's appropriate coming from any member towards any other member. In the cold light of day, I would like to think that the member who made them would reconsider what he said, because this is a public record, and I don't think it shows well on this council if we actually start name-calling across the floor.
Councillor Crothers and Councillor Wilson.
No, thanks very much for giving me a chance. Ivor's absolutely right to raise that. I think this year, and I've commented as part of my comments to both TV and BBC and the wider media, actually, there's a completely different feel in regards to the budget process this year. The leadership within the council, across all political groups, there's a change. There's a level of respect and dignity. It hasn't been shown for a number of years now. And I think it's easy to get emotional, sometimes difficult to constrain that. I've been there myself, but I think I totally agree with Ivor that absolutely we have to show that level of respect toward each other, even if we do feel emotional, because we've got our own personal circumstance that drives those emotions. But I agree with Ivor, and Adam should take the chance to reflect.
Councillor Wilson.
Leader, I do apologise for any offence I caused earlier on, and would like to withdraw the remarks I made earlier on.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Can we move on to item 9, which are minutes for approval? You'll recall that at the last full council meeting, a gremlin had got into the minutes production, and some people had been left off minutes and various other things. So we took them away, and they're back again now for us to put that forward. And second, there's also some for noting as well. I think the first. Right, the minutes of full council have been done, haven't they? We've done that. So the next is the Common Good Fund Subcommittee of the 7th of November.
Happy to move that.
Right.
Happy to second.
Good. Castle Douglas Common Good Fund. Councillor James isn't here. Councillor?
Yeah, happy to move that.
Yeah, and...
Right. I'm happy to second those.
Great. Civic Government Licensing Panel, the 6th of November.
Happy to move that, Leader.
Leader, could I just suggest that we move and second the Arundel and Estill Area Committee one? I think it's the third one on your list there.
Oh, I've missed it. I'm sorry. My apologies, Arundel and Estill Area Committee.
Yeah, so I'll happy to move that.
Okay, Councillor Thompson. And seconder?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Right. Okay, so I've got a mover for a Civic Government Licensing Panel. Have we got a seconder? Yeah,
Happy to
that's it,
second.
yeah, fine. And the licensing panel of the 15th,
Formally moved.
and seconded by Doug, right. Communities Committee, 31st of January.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Good. Simple meeting of the 29th of January.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Crichton Subcommittee, 30th of November.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
EI Committee, 22nd of January.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Employments and Appeals Subcommittee of the 28th of September.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Kirkcudbright Common Good Fund Subcommittee.
Happy to move.
Pleased to second.
Local Review Body of the 14th of September.
Happy to move that.
Happy to second.
Local Review Body of the 5th of December.
Happy to move.
Pleased to second.
Local Review Body of the 16th of January.
Happy to move.
And you got a seconder? Dougie, yeah. Dougie?
Happy to move.
Right. You seconding, Dougie. Nifty Area Committee of the 7th of November.
Happy to move.
Happy second.
Nifty Area Committee of the 21st of January.
Happy to move, leader.
Happy to second, leader.
Pension Subcommittee of the 29th of November.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Police Fire and Rescue Subcommittee of the 11th of December.
Pleased to move.
Right. Policy and Resources Committee of the 24th of January.
Happy to move.
Happy to second. Review of Standard Orders of the 4th of December.
Happy to move.
Stranraer Subcommittee. Stranraer Common Good Fund Subcommittee. I think there is only one person still here from there. Yeah. And second, right. Stewart Area Committee of the 21st of November.
Delighted to move.
And Wigton Area Committee of the 20th of November.
Happy to move.
And I'm also delighted to second. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And then we have a number of minutes for noting as well, which I think are just for noting, aren't they? Okay. Item 11 is any other business deemed urgent. I have been notified of no urgent business which we need to transact today. So if we can go on to consider the adoption of a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of Section 50A4 and Paragraph 1 of Part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Are we happy to exclude the public from the next item? Yes. Right, okay.